Hello and welcome everybody to the 2022 Imagine Cup. So excited to be here for you at the epic kickoff event. This is the first time we've had a kickoff for the Imagine Cup, and we're thrilled to have you here. We have so much in store for you for the 20th anniversary of the Imagine Cup. That's right, Microsoft has been providing this amazing platform for students across the globe for the past 20 years. And over those 20 years, we've seen so much innovation from students everywhere, creating different applications to make an impact in their communities and really make a difference in the lives of the people around them. And we're thrilled to have so many resources for students this year for the Imagine Cup. For one, you should register today if you're not already. Go to imaginecup.com. You can register now. And once you register, you'll have access to our Discord channel where we have conversations, where you can meet your future teammates, where you can form teams, you can talk about the projects you want to bring to life. We have mentors in Discord as well. We'll have our Ask Me Anythings after this event, shortly after this event, where you can ask more specific questions about specific technologies, as well as the different categories that we have for the Imagine Cup. We also have training for you. You can go to GitHub, and we have a bunch of training specifically for Imagine Cup students to find out how to come up with an idea, how to bring that idea to life, how to form a team, what the importance of diversity and inclusion in your projects. So much goodness, all for you at Imagine Cup this year. So we can't wait for you to go check that out. Speaking of the Imagine Cup, we have 4 categories this year: Earth, Education, Health, and Lifestyle. So really, we want you to be thinking about what are the different things that are impacting your community, and how can you use technology to make a difference in those different categories, and bring those categories to the Imagine Cup. We're starting today, right now, with the Build Your Epic kickoff event. And as part of that, we have our Epic Challenge. Our Epic Challenge is an opportunity for you to form your team, bring your pitch for your idea, your 3-minute pitch, as well as your project plan to this challenge to get some early feedback and also to win some prizes. And the top team in each region will move on to the World Finals from the Epic Challenge. The Epic Challenge is optional, so it's really up to you if you want to participate in it. The submission deadline is November 1st, so you've got a couple weeks here to get your pitch together and your project document. But then once you submit, you'll get that feedback and you'll be able to keep on iterating on your project for the Imagine Cup. Once that's done, all students will advance to the online semifinals or their national finals if your country is running one. And at that point, you will be working with your team, iterating on your project, and bringing that submission to those competitions. And there's so much at stake here. $100,000 cash prize to the world champion winner. Mentorship with our CEO, Satya Nadella. You get also an Azure grant. We also have prizes for all of the category winners in each of our regions: Asia, Americas, and Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So there's tons of opportunities for you to get mentorship, to learn how to bring your project to life, to work on a team, to work with folks across the globe, to work with our Azure advocates and Microsoft full-time employees to really help you bring your idea to life in the Imagine Cup. So we have a lot in store for you. We have a lot in store for you today at the Build Your Epic event. We're really excited for that. And immediately after, we'll have our Ask Me Anythings in Discord, as well as our Azure Bootcamp workshop tomorrow morning. So thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to be here, thrilled to have you all. And with that, I'd like to introduce our hosts, Morgan and Seth. Hey, Morgan. Hey, Seth.
How's it going, my friends? I'm super excited to be here. How about you?
Super excited. I mean, first off, back in the studio, vaccinated and
That's
ready
true.
to go.
Vaccinated. Everyone's social distancing from me. I haven't really felt the change from before COVID or after, because everyone seems to have always social distanced from me. I don't know if it was just a me thing or...
I wasn't going to say anything,
well,
but...
This is awkward. This is awkward. We've got a ton of amazing stuff. Hopefully we can zoom and go to my screen, because I want to go through the agenda a little bit so that you can see what we've got in store for you today. Let me go. I'm going to use Zoom It. Look at this. So we got a little welcome from Pablo. You're on this section now. It's only going to get better once Morgan starts talking, everyone else as well. We have Understanding Teams Through Systems Thinking and Story with Scott Hanselman. He has been known to give a good talk or two. Action.
Just one or two.
One or two.
One or two.
Could you give us a little bit of a feeling for like a taste for what this might be?
Well, Scott is an emerging speaker in the tech industry, in case you haven't heard of him.
Sure.
But yes, Scott is a fantastic proponent for D&I and making sure everything is diverse and inclusive. And this year, we are making a huge effort to really help students find teams that may not already have teams for the Imagine Cup. And so once you register for the Imagine Cup, you'll be able to get into our Discord server, which we're super excited about this year, and actually be able to form teams on there, do introductions, find people that are interested in the same thing as you. And so this team formation is going to be really valuable, and I think that the advice that Scott, this up-and-coming speaker in the tech industry, will have some good advice for students.
That's a very good introduction, and I'm going to lean over here because they're telling me my mic is not all the way out, but I'm loud enough that if I project over here, they'll be able to hear me through her mic. The second thing is actionable ideation, how to use 100 bad ideas framework to find your best idea. Donna Sarkar, also an amazing speaker. I'm pretty excited about her talking about that. Then being customer driven, how to discover unmet needs and challenge the world. This is cool because this is the kind of thing that I wish I would have had when I was trying to come up with my own products. What do you think?
100%. Actually, I met Travis right after I joined Microsoft. We were the first cohort of DevDiv to do a PM boot camp, which was a fantastic opportunity. Travis was one of the leads for it, and it always stuck with me that we can be customer obsessed, but it's all data driven, and it's really understanding people. And I don't think a lot of people know, but Travis has actually authored multiple books, and we're going to be sharing some more information about that and how you may be able to access it for free a little bit later.
That's cool. And the cool thing is I actually went to that same workshop that he delivered, and it was remote, obviously, because we're now in this fun stage of life. And I remember, because I read the first couple of chapters, and every time he'd like ask a question during the webinar, I'd be like, hold on. And I'd just like bring his book out, and he'd be like, because he's such a humble guy, he's really cool. Next, we have Failing Can Be Good, bringing a growth mindset to every project with Amanda Silver. I'm a huge fan of Amanda.
Me too, absolutely. Yeah. Amanda is a total idol of mine. That is for sure. For those of you that may not know Amanda, I don't know how you couldn't, but she is the corporate vice president, and she oversees all of our developer products and tools here at Microsoft. So who better to talk really about product iteration and what that looks like. And you know, the idea that it's okay to fail. When I was in school, it was like, oh, everything has to be perfect. Failure is not an option. But really at Microsoft, we have this growth mindset mentality. And so it's okay to fail as long as you learn from it and implement those things. And I think Amanda's going to have wonderful advice.
Fail fast, fail often, because if you're not, it means you're not doing cool stuff. And then finally, there's this one guy who's going to talk about the secrets of product storytelling. And then it's going to be time to go tell your story. Now, the reason why I think we're putting this together is because when we're looking at the projects that maybe you will be proposing for Imagine Cup, these are the skills that you will need to get an awesome presentation. Am I right?
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we decided to do this event, Seth, is I don't think a lot of students are getting this kind of information in the classroom. You're probably learning how to code. Maybe you have a really cool class that teaches you about cloud technologies. But we really don't talk about the product development process, and it's so essential for roles in tech and actually really a lot of different industries. Whether you're going to be a software developer or a program manager or a content creator, everybody should really have these skills and understand what that process looks like. And so that's why we wanted to kick off the Imagine Cup this year with all of that and giving students advice to get started.
Not just kick off any Imagine Cup, but number 20, right?
I was going to say that's 20 in case people can't.
I don't know if that's real sound. I'm really sorry. Now this is like 0 to 20. This is the 20th Imagine Cup, right?
It is. So very special, and that's why we are doing this event for the very first time, and we are super excited about it. And I do have to throw in that it doesn't just end with these talks today. So if you're out there and you're watching, you're a pro dev, you're somebody that's just tuning in, thank you for joining us. But the Imagine Cup is, of course, for our amazing students around the globe. And so for students, we actually are going to have a few other opportunities, both right after this session of talks, as well as tomorrow. So right after these talks, for students who are registered for the Imagine Cup, so make sure you go register if you haven't already, you'll get access to our Discord server, where we're going to have a series of 8 Ask Me Anything sessions with our cloud advocates, engineers, and PMs at Microsoft who are subject matter experts, as well as a few of our Microsoft Learn student ambassadors who are at our gold level, and they're going to be there to answer all of your questions. Some are about tech, and then some are about those 4 categories that Pablo was talking about before that students can submit to. And so that will be really exciting. Students will be able to directly ask their question, and then of course have follow-up conversations in Discord. They can start meeting team members in Discord. It'll be great. And that's going to be important because tomorrow we are going to have an Azure Boot Camp where we will be running 4 technical sessions.
Making boots. Oh, no, sorry. Not that kind of boot camp.
No.
4 technical sessions. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll get you into a boot camp later on.
They mean kick me out. You're getting the boot camp, Seth.
And on that note, so there will be 4 awesome sessions. We'll be talking about web dev, Power Apps, IoT, and Lobe. We're going to have a ton of mentors online. They're going to be self-guided workshops, actually, which is super cool. So students can go at their pace and do what they're interested in. But there will be a ton of support for if you have questions, workshop leads that'll give you different milestones and advice on how to get there, but without telling students how to do that. And I think that that is a super valuable lesson of being able to go and find that information for yourself. Spend some time on GitHub, Stack Overflow, Bing, all the usual suspects.
All the usuals. Is that what the youths say today, the usual? No.
I don't think so.
Well, I think we are about out of time for us, so I think it's time to kick it over to Scott. Scott, are you there, my friend?
Hello.
Hello, are you there, buddy?
I am talking.
I hear you a little bit.
Hello, Scott.
Hey, friends. How are you?
Good. We're going to toss it over to you, man. Are you okay if we ask questions during the thing?
You're more than welcome to interrupt me at any point because it's all about learning. We don't want to talk at people. We want to talk with people.
All right, let's do it, man. Over to you, bud.
All right, my friends. How's it going? I'm Scott Hanselman, and I'm very happy to be here today. This is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, we'll all learn together, and we'll stay in touch as well on social media afterwards. Let's go ahead and bring up my amazing epic slides first here and take a look. So first off, I was told that Comic Sans was an unprofessional font, so I've already failed at this presentation, and we've only just begun. What we're going to do right off the bat is switch that font out because that's obviously unacceptable and unprofessional. So we'll switch that into something a little bit more cool. We'll add a little bit of a shadow there, which is nice. And now, it's a white background, and I don't really like that. So let's go ahead and put in a nice bit of evocative stock photography because that's the illusion, right? Isn't that what our desks are supposed to look like if we're software engineers and programmers? They're supposed to have a nice sunshine streaming into the window there. We've got all the fanciest, latest hardware. That's probably not what your office is going to end up looking like. Your office is probably going to end up looking like this at some point. So right off the bat, I want to take a moment and just break down the illusions about what things are going to look like. Your office will look something between this and this, or my office behind me right here. Although this could be a background, we don't know. But above all, we want you to feel welcome. We want you to feel welcome not just at the Imagine Cup, but we want you to feel welcome in tech, whether it be your first project, whether you're heading into school, or you're heading out to school into your first job. We want you to feel welcome, and we want you to feel welcome on these teams. Right? So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about attitude and style. And then we're going to start thinking about that within the context of what's called systems thinking, and then team dynamics. And then hopefully we'll tell a couple of stories about problem solving, because what you're going to be doing is solving problems. And you're going to be solving problems your entire life, whether they be personal problems or professional problems. And thinking about how you exist within a team and how you exist within a system is the way that you get, as Donna Sarkar says, actionable ideation. And then you're going to think about who your customer is, because sometimes your customer is you. And sometimes it's going to be someone you've never met before. So Travis is going to help us understand that. And then I'm a big fan of failing, but you need a safe place to fail. So we're going to hear about that from Amanda Silver, about what a growth mindset is and how important it is to be able to fail safely. And then Seth, one of my favorite storytellers, will probably talk about my stories and say how they're not as good, and then tell stories of his own, which is going to be fun. And then we'll send you off into the world to talk about your own stories. So first, let's talk about attitude and style. In the old days, in the old days, tech was a little bit different. And we talk about inclusion right now, but it's interesting to look at this magazine from March of 1984, where we have a young lady here with her bubble gum and her glasses, and she is coding on her TI 89 or TI 99. So she's coding right now, and wouldn't that be wonderful to just go into a grocery store and grab a computer magazine off of the shelf with a young lady on the front that looks just like you, who is going and coding and having a great time. We've gone away from that a little bit in the 90s and the early 2000s, but I think we're getting back to the realization that coding is for everyone, tech is for everyone. And that's one of the reasons that we do things here at the Imagine Cup and at Microsoft, is to make sure that everybody feels included. Now, there's this quote that gets used a lot. And I thought it was a really good quote. I thought it was one of my favorite quotes, but then I realized it's not actually that good. The quote is, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. But I found this better alternative that I really like, and it's worth thinking about for a second. Diversity is going to a party, but inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. Isn't that a great freaking deep quote right there? Inclusion is being a member of the party planning committee. We always talk about making room at the table, but we never talk about who made the table. And that's one of the things that's so powerful about being in software and being in hardware and being in tech. I want you to think really hard about this. There are 8 billion people on the planet, and virtually all of them are touched in some way by software. But how many software developers are there? 60 million? 100 million? Tenth of a billion? 60 million people are affecting the lives of 8 billion. The power that one has as a software engineer is extraordinary. So whether you are 1 year into your career or whether you're 30 years into your career, the power that you have is already incredibly great. And that power should be used to improve the lives of the people around you. And that's really, really powerful stuff. And hopefully you'll build us a new table, which is going to be great. Now, in, I want to say not the 70s, but I was thinking more like the 1500s or even earlier, maybe even the 1200s, early early days before the average Joe or Jane could read, the priests had all the knowledge. They were the ones who knew how to read. They had the books, and they would say, look at this book that we've brought to you. Don't touch it. Just look at the book. Oh, you can't read? I will read that book to you. And they had power. The reading and the ability that they had to share knowledge was their power. And they kept the power away from the people because the people couldn't read. Okay. When people have power, it tends to be hoarded. It tends to be kept to themselves. This is a great quote from Ted Nelson from 1974. This quote looks like it could have been written in a blog in 2021, but this was actually written many, many years ago. Knowledge is power and tends to be hoarded. So experts rarely want people to understand what they do, and they generally enjoy putting people down. Now, this is a general quote. It doesn't mean everybody likes to put people down, but it does make you think about, when you have knowledge and when you have power, will you help people understand? Will you share that knowledge freely? Will you give that information away? Or will you keep it to yourself and enjoy putting people down? That's an interesting quote, isn't it? All right. So we don't want to develop this technology priesthood, this exclusion, this exclusive club. This is not a club. We want you all to share your knowledge freely so that we can make things better for everyone. This needs to be the case as a community. but it also needs to be the case in your small teams. So whether it be a team of 4, a team of 40, or the entire community that you're a member of, you want to make sure that um, you are conscious. All right, cool. Let's move to the next slide here. All right. Now there's this word that gets used that's called gatekeepers. Now, gatekeeping and gatekeepers are at a high level. They're the people that control information flow. But gatekeeping within the context of tech are usually people that are keeping you from your goal by putting up an arbitrary gate, an arbitrary door. They're the people who kind of check your ID as you try to get into the club. They are data decision makers. They're the people who say, I think you need a degree, or you don't have enough experience, but in order to get a job, you need experience, but I can't give you an experience without a job. So you're in trouble. And how information flows, whether it be communication or whether it be people who have information, is usually affected by biases like personal preference and social influences, all the different things. So people tend to hire people that from their town, from their school, their alumni. People tend to hire people who look like them. They also tend to hire people who think like them, which is something that we want to watch out for as well. We want to make sure that we're building teams that look like them all, that have all different perspectives and are not just the same people who grew up in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, which is really important. Now, I have been on the internet for a very, very long time. I'm actually going to bring my screen over here and just give you a sense of what a really long time looks like. Here is my blog. I've been blogging now since 2002. And if I go up here and let's just scroll down a little bit, here's 2020, which was not a good year for everybody. I think we all felt that 2020 could have been better. But I was able to eke out a blog post Tuesday and Thursday, basically every single uh, month, every single week rather. And you'll notice that it's not 5 days a week. It's once or twice a week, maybe a couple more, because I'm trying to share my energy. I'm trying to share my energy. I'm trying to use that as an outlet. I'm going to talk more about that. But as you join these teams, you're going to want to think about all the great stuff that you're working on and how you can share that work with others. Because you're going to go and put out some great work on the Imagine Cup. You don't want to waste your keystrokes. You want to share your experiences. You might think to yourself, well, I don't really have anything to talk about. I'm not an expert at anything. What would I even say? If you share your energy about the things that you're working on and you think about where you're going to put your keystrokes, I'm going to talk about that in a second, and you're kind, that energy will come back to you. Sometimes it will be lonely. Sometimes I blog and I think no one's listening, but most of the time that energy comes right back to me. So what do I mean by conserving your keystrokes? Well, this is a little bit of a morbid thing. Some people think that this is a bad idea, but I've actually made a website, and the website is called keysleft.com. And this website tells you how many keystrokes are in your hands. What do I mean by that? Well, when I say conserve your keystrokes, this is based on a theory that you're only going to be around for so long, maybe 100 years. So you have a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die. Wow, Scott, that's a downer. Thanks for taking it there. Well, what I'm talking about is you're excited about the Imagine Cup. You're 21 and you type 80 words a minute. You have 317 million keystrokes left in your hands before you die, and they're going down right now as we sit here. So where are you going to choose to spend your time? Where are you going to choose to spend your time? Are you going to write emails? Are you going to write computer programs? Are you going to write novels? Are you going to write tweets? Where are you going to give people the gift of your keystrokes? Why is this important? Well, let's say that you're working in a team. Are you going to send that team emails or chats or Slacks? Or are you going to make documents? Are you going to express your thoughts in maybe a white paper or a one pager and express to people that you have an opinion and have those keystrokes work for you when you are asleep? This is hugely important. Let's say that after this wonderful event here, that someone decides to send me a question, or they send Amanda a question, or they say, "Hey, Donna, this is great. I'm loving what you're talking about." And then we think to ourselves, "Well, I mean, that's a great question, but I don't know you. I don't want to give you the gift of 2,000 of my keystrokes, you know?" But it was a great question. So, how do I balance the idea that I can't answer everyone's question? I'm working on a project, I'm doing something in the form of a team, but these are great questions and this information needs to be shared. How do I deal with the fact that I only have 8 hours of work every day? But, there's 24 hours in a day, maybe I need to work harder. What I do is I go and I will send you an email that is a link to a blog post that I wrote, and the blog post is where I put my keystrokes, or a OneNote, or a Word document, or literally anywhere in the world but email. Could be a Google Doc, could be a SharePoint, it doesn't matter. Somewhere with a URL. So if you're working in a team, rather than sending emails with lots of information, rather than sending a wall of text, in a team, consider writing things down in a document, sharing that document on a link to it in an email, and then having people chat about it. It really changes things and it makes your keystrokes work for you while you're asleep. So that means I'm going to go to bed and people are going to talk about that document. But if I put it in email, they're not going to be able to find it. They're going to be like, I think we talked about this last week. This can all be really, really confusing. So what you want to do is make a blog, make a medium, put them on, Twitter if you have to, anywhere at all that has a URL. Now, when we're doing this, sometimes people will create documents that are going to make you feel a little stressed out because it's like, wow, that was an amazing technical document, but I'm not that good. I'm not a professional. I've been doing this for 30 plus years and I am still an amateur. I consider myself an amateur because everything that I learned in college, every piece of tech that I learned in college is gone. But I learned how to learn. So when you're working in a team, you're going to be collecting technical knowledge, you're going to be collecting APIs and functions and methods. But what you really want to collect is the knowledge about how to interact with other people. All right. We're going to think about personal dynamics because we're all amateurs. Really, there are no true professionals in the software engineering industry. Sometimes someone will say, "Well, I've got 5 years experience," and you have, I don't know, one, so they have 5 times more experience. But then we have to ask ourselves, is this a person with 20 years experience, or do they just have the same year over and over 20 times? This is a really tough thing, I think, for early in career people to think about. But at some point, you're going to have 5 years experience, and then 10, and then 20, and then 30. And you're going to look back on it. And then maybe you'll use that information like those technology priests, and you'll use that to exclude people. Or you'll think about how many years you've had the fresh experience, a new experience, a thoughtful experience. I really had to think about what that meant to me because I am now later in my career and I've got a lot of experience in the space. But there were some years there where I was asleep. I let that year go by. Okay. That might have meant that uh, a year was wasted. And that can be difficult. We need to forgive ourselves when those things happen. For example, you might feel like you're seeing everyone else being more productive. You're on Instagram, you're on Twitter, and everyone is so productive, and they're so much more productive than you are. And you have to forgive yourself because you weren't productive that day. You don't want to get caught up in that hustle culture. And when we think about years of experience, there may be years where you don't do anything interesting, where you don't learn. And what you need to do is catch yourself and try to be intentional and say, I'm going to pause for a second and think about like, wow, I don't really think I learned anything. I didn't learn anything at that time. And in not learning something that time, I use that as an opportunity. I use that as a moment to go and reset. You understand? So I reset how I'm thinking about things and I wake up. And then you'll fall asleep again and you'll wake up again. But you'll lose time. And over your career, you're going to want to wake up. Of my 30 years experience in software, I'm going to say probably 7 I didn't learn anything. And sometimes that was a bad boss or it was an uncomfortable company or it was a bad team. But for the most part, it was just me kind of sleepwalking through that. So when you're on your team and you're working on your projects, try to be as in the moment and as present as possible, to be as modest as possible, and kind of reset yourself because every day is a new day for you to go and wake up with a fresh perspective and try again. You don't have to look back on the past and beat yourself up. Now, there's a great question here from the audience about if we aren't experts, what's the best way to become one? That's a tough one. There are expert surgeons and there are really good software engineers. So when I say there are no experts, I'm saying that technology is moving so fast that the thing that you're an expert in today may not exist tomorrow. Here's a great example. Here's Tim Berners-Lee. Tim Berners-Lee is the inventor of the World Wide Web. Okay. So, we all walk around with our experiences and our knowledge, and we know what we did. Imagine walking around and knowing that you're the person that invented the internet, the World Wide Web as we know it. And I think it's kind of cool that Tim Berners-Lee says that he's a web developer. He could have said the web developer. Everyone's so excited to become a senior engineer, to become a senior web developer. And here's Tim Berners-Lee saying, I'm just web developer, not the web developer. That would be a pretty sweet flex. I had a business card. What do you do? I'm the web developer. Yeah, all of it. Made that. That was me. Put that on your LinkedIn, kids. So Tim Berners-Lee is an example of being modest and being humble. He's probably an expert, but at the same time, does he know all the CSS and React and Angular? He made the thing, but he probably doesn't know the latest frameworks and all of that kind of stuff. So, what's the best way to become an expert? So, this is what I like to say here. This is my Ted Lasso shirt here. Be curious, not judgmental. Tim Berners-Lee is a great example of that. So what you can do is be curious, be thoughtful, ask questions, but acknowledge that you're never going to know it all, even if you did invent the web itself. As such, it's a good idea for all of us to find mentors. Find mentors in our lives, collect those mentors. And even if you're me or you're Tim Berners-Lee, you're never too old to get good advice. So a lot of times when we're in tech, we think that mentorship should be an age thing. If you're not careful, you'll end up with your mentorship relationship being a weekly lecture from an old person. And we don't want that. You don't want your relationships to be like this. You want them to be more equal like this. So you should not only find a mentor, you should consider being a mentor because I know that our friends who are watching today are not too young to share their own experiences. Find someone who's just a year behind and mentor them, help them out. And you'll notice when you're on a team and building up your teams, there's going to be different relationships within that team. You can use those moments to say, hey, I'd love to work with you, and maybe you could share some of your knowledge about that. Those are opportunities to find and collect mentors. I like to collect mentors like Pokemon and share them with my friends, and I would encourage you to do the same as well. Now, there's this term mentorship that gets thrown around a lot, but there's also a great word called sponsorship. So as you get later in your career, be thinking about um, that word sponsorship. What's the difference? Okay. So mentors are people that you can bounce ideas off of. They help you define your dream. They think about your strengths. You might have a project mentor that can help you with the project, look at the team, think about the team's strengths, advise the team, and guide them. But sponsors are more like spotlights. Sponsors create luck for the team by bringing new opportunities and lifting people up into new spaces, giving them a audience that they would not necessarily have. Okay, so mentorship and sponsorship are different things, and we want to think about that. There's actually a spectrum of sponsorship because some people are strategizers and some people are connectors and like to introduce people to each other. Some people just give opportunities. They're just like, oh, I have a thing. Maybe you should go talk to this person. They've got a great opportunity, and they give you opportunities. They bring you into rooms with them. Some sponsors will advocate for you and talk about you in the best way behind your back. So that is a spectrum. Imagine a slider bar of volume. What kind of a sponsor do you want? Do you want them to lecture you once a week and give their advice? Do you want them to tell stories? Or do you want them to go and actively advocate for you? That's a spectrum. A lot of people just thought that a mentor is someone that you talk to every once in a while who's old. That is not the way to do it. Okay. And then you may not feel that you have anything to offer. I see questions here in the chat about maybe that I don't have anything to offer. I think that you do. Everybody has a thing. Everyone's um, journey is unique. And I think a lot of us need to give ourselves credit for having an interesting journey. You have interests outside of tech, you have how you grew up, you have your people and your culture and your family, and they're different than mine. And that in itself is an interesting story that you can tell. And you've probably worked on projects or had interesting projects at class. Those are all stories that you can tell. So people have more than they realize when they can offer. The other thing about mentorship that's important to remember is that it's not forever. It's not something that you get married and you have to stay together forever. It's happens in phases. So maybe you have a mentor for a project, or maybe you have a mentor for your degree, or for a problem that you're trying to work past. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so let's talk about storytelling a little bit because I love telling tech stories. So I'll tell you a few tech stories, and maybe if we have enough time, we'll chat with Seth and Morgan, but we'll see. So first story is I keep this knife on my this little Swiss Army knife on my desk here because my dad told me once that it's okay to be a funny little knife that isn't amazing at everything. This knife right here is the Swiss Army knife, and it's not really a good pair of scissors, and it's kind of a mediocre saw. There's so much about this knife that makes it kind of ridiculous, but it's a pretty good knife. And then the other tools are all the other things that it can do, like a magnifying glass and a corkscrew and a tiny little pair of these are screwdrivers for your glasses. A lot of people think that they should specialize in tech. You should do one thing and one thing really well. But if you do that, you'll find often that that thing will not be needed anymore. Um, this is a ruler here, but I don't know what this part does, this little bendy part. So that might be a piece of tech that has gone away. So what you want to focus on is being a good knife. You don't want to skimp on the basics. You want to think about the fundamentals of software. Remember before when I said that most of the stuff that I use in my degree is gone. The fundamentals aren't. Learning how to learn. Computers have CPUs, they have memory, they have storage. There's a network. The network adds latency, meaning things slow down when you put stuff on the internet. Those are fundamental things, whether you have an iPhone or a Windows device or an IoT device. The idea that there's a computer in there with a CPU and memory and storage and all those things are the basics. So the fundamentals of problem solving, how systems are built and layered, how you compose things from pieces, and the patterns that you're going to see on this project and in your career, they are all fundamental. So it's okay to be a funny little knife. It's okay to be interested in AR and VR and be interested in web development and be interested in game development. Or it's okay to just be focused on, one thing that you care about, the one thing you're super geeked about. But don't skimp on the basics. Build those stories, listen to the stories about the basics from your friends, your mentors, and your sponsors. So here's a couple of silly stories. Okay. All right. First, problem solving. Problem solving. You know how you have a person in your school or in your work who is like able to solve problems so quickly, and you think to yourself, "Wow, I don't know how they're able to solve these problems. How did you know the answer so quickly?" All right. You call a non-technical parent and you help them reboot the router, and they're like, "How did you know which button to push?" You didn't know. You don't know. You're just asking yes, no questions at scale. The thing that you're good at is Googling for stuff and going, "Is that the thing? No, yes, no, yes, no." Breaking problems down at scale. The only difference between me with 30 years experience and you with 30 days or 30 months experience is that I've seen a lot of stuff and I can eliminate things quickly. So let's do a quick brain teaser here. My toaster is broken, people. I need toast. And you might say to yourself, this is not a coding problem, Mr. Hanselman. Why are you wasting my time at the Imagine Cup talking about your toaster? Well, in fact, this is a systems thinking problem. We have an issue. We have no toast. This is a huge problem. We need to fix it. So what are we going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to do what? We're going to be simple thinking people and we're just going to buy a new toaster, right? That will solve the problem. Maybe that will solve the problem, but that is simple thinking. We're not thinking about the system within which the toaster exists. This is not a toaster that is floating in white space like this. Notice that this toaster doesn't appear to have an electrical cord, which is concerning. I'm not sure how this toast appeared here. This toaster exists within a system. Your software, your solution, the things that you make exist within a system. So, systems think, excuse me, systems thinking for toast. Is the power on? Is the power on? Oh my goodness. Okay, that's great. That's a nice binary yes or no. That's going to answer a lot, because if the power is on, then we're going to go off and have a whole other conversation. But if the power is off, well, let's plug something else in. Think about that for a second. I want toast. The toaster is broken. We're focused on the toaster. And the first thing I'm going to do is unplug it and plug something else in. Scandalous. No, it's systems thinking, because it exists within this system that includes power. Well, maybe I blew a fuse. Maybe I'll go out in the garage or the back room and find the fuse box and reset that fuse. Is the power on at all? One time I was giving a presentation at Black Girls Code, and the little 14-year-old girls, I was teaching them that code, and they were like, "Why are we talking about toast?" And we were going through this exercise about the toaster, and I was like, "These are very clever kids." And then one of them yells out, "Do the neighbors have power?" That was amazing. Think about that for a second. Just like drink this in. I said I want toast, and now we're looking out the window and asking the question, do the neighbors have power? That is a programmer. That is systems thinking. We're thinking about how I'm going to get this toast, but if the city doesn't have any power, then how am I getting toast today? Turns out that the issue was not at all the toaster. In fact, the young ladies concluded that there was some kind of an electromagnetic pulse, and aliens had taken over the world, and they'd blown the power out in the entire city, and that was why I did not have toast. So that's how I learned that I wasn't getting toast that day. Yes. Someone in the chat says, was it DNS? Yeah, it was probably DNS. It's always DNS. We'll talk about that in a second, actually. Hang on. And we'll talk about what is DNS and why that matters in a moment. Good, fun question there from our friends in the chat. The only difference between early in career and later in career people is that early in career people Google with Bing a lot, and later in career people like myself can ask a question, one question, and they can eliminate an entire class of problem. They can take the problem space and they can do what's called bisect it. They can bisect the problem and they can cut it in half. And now a whole chunk of problems fall away, and now I have another one. And I ask a question, I ask a question, I ask a question, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, that joke a moment ago where someone says it's always DNS, a very famous joke from our American president, Abraham Lincoln. I know that Abraham Lincoln said that because I read it on the internet, and everything on the internet is true. This is a list of stuff that came directly out of my brain. I did not go and search the web for any of this. Someone asked me why their website wasn't working, and I wrote this list. Now, I could probably write 30 pages of stuff like this on the left here. Just little stuff. Is the file locked? Is there a good connection string? Is it DNS? All those questions. The difference between early in career and late in career is that I've collected these, collected past tense, and you are collecting them now. Isn't that interesting? So then how are you going to get a list like this where you can put this list into your brain? That's where you need the comfort, the privilege, and the allowance to fail fast. You need to be able to fail. Failing can be good. Amanda's going to talk about that in a couple of hours, about an hour and 15 minutes, about how failing can be good. A growth mindset is a person who can collect these, but a good team needs the ability to fail without major consequences. Sometimes that can be a privilege thing where I have the privilege to fail and people aren't going to go, man, Hanselman's a bozo. He keeps messing up. And for other people, that's going to be how many opportunities you can get, because you can't collect stories like this unless you have opportunities. Now, this one here that was added, see where it says it's never twins? There are also going to be things that you need to remember that it's probably not going to be. It's never going to be. There is a famous Sherlock Holmes where someone kills their husband, and then the police say, "Oh my goodness, she killed her husband, but she has an alibi. She was on the other side of the street. She was over on the other side of town. You know, she killed him on the west side, but she was seen on the east side." And then Watson says immediately, "Oh my goodness, Holmes, could it have been twins?" And he says, "No, it's never twins. It's never twins." There are things in technology that it just won't be. And you'll learn those as well. One of the questions in the chat about how do we collect and remember these learnings? If you think that being in tech is about being an encyclopedia of little details, sometimes it can be. But I can only say this as an older person. You will be shocked at how many stories that you can remember when you get old. And I hope that you all have the opportunity to get old. So the way that you collect these things is you either write them down or you make stories about them and remember those stories. Remembering individual little tech things is hard, but remembering stories is easier. I tend to write things down in Moleskine notebooks. So I would encourage you to start writing. I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of these. But for me, I tell stories. Now, layering is an interesting thing in software, and layering hides complexity from yourself and from others. But layering, they don't tell you this in school, my friends, is actually just lying. The computer is lying from itself, lying to itself. It's hiding complexity behind either a user interface or an API, an application programming interface. So here's a good example where something is being reused and we're kind of lying to ourselves, but no one really thinks about it. Here's an email. You've sent an email, but you don't really think about an email, right? You don't really think about how it's being sent. But I could take this email and I'm going to turn it around like I'm turning a picture around, and we're going to look at the back side of it. This is the back side of an email. This is what an email looks like if it didn't have a pretty user interface. Look at this. From colon, to colon, date colon, subject colon. It's just a series of name value pairs. Email is a hash table. You may have learned about hash tables in school. There's also a boundary here that separates the plain text from the other things that might be in the email. Now, you may have worked on HTML before, and you may have posted an HTML form. Here's what an HTML form looks like. Okay, so here is an email, name value pairs in text, and here's an HTML form. It's name value pairs in text. Email and HTML forms and most everything on the entire internet, whether it be Redis or Cosmos DB, is name value pairs at scale, which means once you learn an idea, you can learn that other ideas grow out of them. So effectively, it's all just internet traffic, isn't it? It's just text over ports. HTML is text that goes over a specific port, and email is text that goes over another port. This is important to remember because just when you think that something is complicated, in fact, it's simple. Here's an example of an old record player, an RCA Victrola on the right-hand side here. And on the left-hand side is a hard drive. So isn't that interesting? Two spinning disks with information encoded on them with heads that retrieve and decode that information. It's almost like the wheel was a good idea and circles are efficient and interesting ways to share information. Now, when we understand these things, we can start composing them together. We can compose things where something has something else. We can build up systems and layer them together. This gentleman here is an actor named Chris Connor, and he was in a great show that you should check out called Altered Carbon. And in Altered Carbon, he played an AI, he played an artificial intelligence in the form of Edgar Allan Poe. These are the ravens from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And so in this show, the hero needs a place to stay, so he runs into this hotel, and Edgar Allan Poe here, Chris Connor, is the AI that runs the hotel. So his partner, his buddy, is Edgar Allan Poe. So I chatted him on Twitter because I was a fan of him as an actor because he does an amazing job. Just chews up the screen on Altered Carbon, and I ended up doing a podcast with him. So here's me and Chris doing a podcast, and then I lost the files. I did the podcast. I'm thinking to myself, I've got a bromance now with this gentleman, and we're going to be friends. I'm going to take my SD card home, and then here's what happened. I get home, and I put the SD card into my computer, and I see this. I see empty folders, not just empty folders, but an infinite number of empty folders just sitting there. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I'm never going to be able to hang out with this man again. The bromance is over. I've just wasted an hour of his time, had him drive to downtown Portland, do a podcast. It's a whole thing now. But then I look in Windows and I can see that the hard drive, the little SD card, thinks that it's got used space, but it clearly doesn't think that from a Windows Explorer's perspective. I'm not an expert in hardware. I'm not an expert in low-level stuff. But remember, I learned how to learn. This is a problem. There's a system. How does this fit into the system? This thing has those bytes. Did the bytes disappear? Maybe they're just not accessible. It's like having a house and then walling off a door. The room still exists, but I need to find a new door. So I started learning about FAT, the file allocation table, FAT, FAT, and found a number of places where things were supposed to be other things. I started exploring the array of bytes that is the disk, and ended up, after many hours, digging up those WAV files and finding them. And I published the podcast, and it was really good, and I survived. Does that mean I'm an expert debugger? No. Does it mean that I recognize that nothing in the computer is hidden from me? That's the trick. I discovered that the system is composed of these layers, and they build on top of each other. And while I had previously thought about things at this level, at the application level, I could go and read about file systems and I/O and go deeper and deeper. You don't have to. If you want to just take an Uber, that's great. But you could also learn how to be a mechanic, change your oil, learn about your tires and car maintenance, and you'll be a more interesting Uber rider. And in doing this, we collect these patterns. Now that I've done that, now that I've had that story happen to me, I will be able to see it again and do something about it again. I've seen that before. One example of another, most of my stories, by the way, and most of your stories in software are going to be many, many, many hours of debugging, because that's just how it is. You're going to find yourself doing something. I spent 13 hours debugging a thing on a Raspberry Pi. And it turns out when I took the two files, the good file and the bad file, and I compared them to each other, I made a folder here called good and another folder called weirdness. And I had another folder called bad. So I had this file was working on the Raspberry Pi and this file was not working. And look at this. I noticed that one byte, a single byte, was being removed when I copied it to the Raspberry Pi. The 0D, you can see the holes here. The byte 0D was being removed when I copied my file over. Why would that happen? How weird is that? Well, it turns out I was using FTP, the file transfer protocol, and there was a feature here that says treat files without an extension as text, as ASCII. So I was sending a binary file over to another computer, and it ended up being treated as a text file. So then what's 0D? Well, it's 2021, my friends. We are 1/5 of the way through the 21st century, and 0D still means carriage return. And the young people say, what's a carriage? Where is it returning? Well, my friends, a carriage is the top part of the typewriter that holds the paper. And the carriage return is this bar here, the carriage return lever. And you pull it back, and you type, 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 and the carriage goes bump, 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 bump as it moves the paper. And then it goes ding, and you carriage return, and then you line feed, and you rotate this, what's called the platen, and the paper comes up. Why are we talking about this in 2021? Because every text file and Git and GitHub and all the things that you do have carriage returns and line feeds, and you're going to have to think about them at some point. So when I saw that 0D, I said to myself, that's 13 hex, which is a carriage return. And that's causing me trouble on a Raspberry Pi that was invented 100 years after this typewriter was invented. But now I can go and learn about the history. I can read about these kinds of things. And a quite great question here in the chat that someone is saying it can be draining to find the motivation for these things. How do I keep up? You have to figure out where you find your energy. Is your energy found by going out? Is your energy found by going in? Is your energy found by sleeping? Is your energy found by partying? Everyone has their energy differently. My energy is discovering these stories. This is exciting stuff. How fun, how cool is this? Collecting these stories is where I find my joy. So we're going to run out of time here. So I'm going to just jump ahead a little bit and get towards the end here. And maybe we can actually ask a couple of questions as we get ready for our next guest. But I do know that we are so glad that you're here, that you're joining us on this day. And thank you. And I hope you follow me on Twitter. And I'm also on TikTok, which was probably a huge mistake, but I'm there anyway. So let's go back to our friends in the studio and get ready for some more exciting talks.
Welcome back, everybody. How you doing?
Well, that was a pretty cool talk.
It was, but Scott, are you still there? There's some questions from the audience that we want to get. Are you still there?
I am here.
Okay, so here's a question, a couple of them, and these are really good. The first one is, I don't feel like I have anything to offer somebody that I would ask to be my mentor. How do I look for mentorship? That's a really good question.
Yeah, I touched on that question earlier. That's an interesting one. I think that people need to give themselves a little bit of credit. It's not about the information that you have. It's not that I know stuff, therefore I'm a good mentor. It's more that I experienced things and I can share those experiences with people. So rather than thinking about the stuff you know and whether or not that makes you a good mentor, instead, think about whether or not your story is interesting and could then somehow be applied to them. Try to apply empathy. Everyone's come up in the world is different. Some people come up rich, some people come up poor, some people come up speaking one language, some people come up speaking five. Everyone has a different story and yours is interesting. Can your story help someone else? Is the question you should be asking yourself.
All right, Scott, I have another question for you, and this one's for my own sake and sanity, selfishly. So I think when a lot of people are getting into tech, there's this misconception that they have to be, they have to know what they want to do, whether that's software engineering, program management. Some people may not even know what the different roles are in tech. Could you give a little advice to people about kind of finding that niche, and then also what skills really umbrella all of those roles in tech?
That's a great question. So people need to remember that you don't have to pick one thing. Some cultures and some countries have tests that they give kids early where your life gets cut in half and you're going to be a plumber or you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer or you're going to be a whatever. But I think that in the modern age right now, we have a little bit more flexibility. The same thing applies to tech. If I wanted to switch gears and become a network engineer, it might be a pay cut and a step backwards because I would go off and turn left and go to a different direction, and then I'd build up in that new direction. If I wanted to go into testing instead of coding, or if I wanted to go into community management rather than program management, you can change your career in the middle. You can try different stuff. You can switch languages. The fear is that you're going to pick a language or pick a technology and it's going to be the wrong one. You can change. You can change those. Now, what we need to do, what I need to do, and what you in the studio need to do as people who are a little later in our career is we need to make welcoming places for people to be able to fail safely, to be able to say, this wasn't really my thing. I'm going to try something else. Trying as many things as possible is how you become an interesting person. Eating the same thing is far less interesting than trying everything in the cafeteria.
That's awesome. I love that. Here's another question. If we aren't experts, what is the best way to become one?
Live, experience. Try as many things as possible. Try new things. Talk to people who don't look like you, who didn't come from where you came from. Read, watch documentaries, think, talk to people. That is how you become an expert at anything. Share your stories, collect people, collect kind people like Pokemon and share them with your friends.
Well, love the Pokemon reference. I played a lot of Pokemon Go.
I still do.
Yeah.
Well, not Go, but with my son, he loves Pokemon. So I always make a joke that I know them all, but I don't.
That's a lot of Pokemon to know.
Do we have another question for Scott?
Well, of course, there's always questions for Scott.
Let's do it.
All right, Scott, next question. 3 answers. What would be the top 3 things that you think all students need, skill-wise, before they enter the tech industry?
That's a good one.
3 things. 3 things students need. I would say empathy. Really understanding what empathy means. Empathy means putting yourself into the shoes of another person. Being able to think about what it would be like to be that person. Does that make sense? The next thing would be patience and communication. And I would say a good understanding of the fundamentals of computing. You thought I was going to say Java and JavaScript and C#, but I did not.
Hey, you took
Humans
my
make this happen.
punchline there, Scott.
Say that again?
You took my punchline there. I was going to say students were probably expecting, .NET, you should understand how the cloud works, you should be an expert in AI. But I really love how you took a step back from that, and I totally agree that things like empathy and emotional intelligence and the ability to communicate well with others and be able to be on an effective team with others is super duper important. And if you're not prepared for that as you go into tech, I think it can be a little bit difficult.
Well said. And actually, I want to grab a question out of the chat here, and that kind of feeds on that. That someone says, if they search and find solutions easily, it feels like cheating. How do you overcome that feeling? That's a great question. And I think the way you've solved that is by taking a moment and understanding the solution. Copy pasting code from Stack Overflow is cheating. Now, does that mean it's bad? No, because you're moving the project forward. But copy pasting it and not understanding at all what you did is the same as taking a paragraph and copy pasting it directly into a report and then trying to build a report in prose about a topic without actually understanding what's going on. You can't just do that. So the way that you overcome the feeling of feeling like cheating is you go back later and you go, all right, I fixed my Raspberry Pi problem, but why is 0D a carriage return? You have to go back and do your research. That is the thing about software, that it will always turn into deeper research and reading. And a lot of people don't do that. So yes, anything you can do to dig deeper into the why is super helpful.
And here's maybe a finishing question. How, and this I struggle with too, and I've been in tech for like 25 years. I'm really a lot older than I look.
Just 25?
I use moisturizer. Scott, how do you give yourself the space for growth while allowing your brain to be like, it's okay to not be perfect? You know what I'm saying? There's this imposter syndrome versus, am I really, it's technical to be doing the thing? How do you allow the space for yourself to have empathy for who you are and your growth?
Yeah, there's this term that people don't use enough anymore. I think maybe your grandparents may have said it a lot, but the term grace. Give yourself a little grace. Give yourself grace. That means you need to sit quietly in a room by yourself. Give yourself permission to forgive your mistakes, things that you may have done that were not awesome. Grace is celebrating what you did today. It's not listing out all the stuff that you didn't do today, right? Grace is the moment of recognizing that you did a good job, even if you don't feel good, and remembering that you can try again tomorrow. You need to learn to give yourself a little grace. And then we, as people who make spaces like Microsoft, like Imagine Cup, we need to set people up for success by giving them space to give themselves grace.
Love it.
Super well said. I mean, I'm inspired, and I think that giving grace, especially to yourself, not an easy thing to do, but I think that's really where that growth mindset comes in, and give yourself the ability to fail, but make sure that you are learning from those failures. I always like to say that if you aren't failing, you probably aren't challenging yourself enough. And so I think Scott's advice is pretty sound.
Yeah, do you have any final parting words, Scott?
I hope that you all have fun, and remember to, as my friend Ted Lasso says, be curious, not judgmental.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was awesome. I had a really good time with that. Who do we got coming up next? By that was awesome. If you missed any of it, this is going to be recorded. People can go and take a look at it later, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they should definitely watch it
They
live.
should definitely watch it live. Okay, so what do we have coming up next?
Well, you did read the schedule earlier.
I did. I have it on here. It's my good friend Donna Sarkar.
I love Donna. She is amazing. I think she is a prime example of somebody who is in tech but really has passions outside of tech as well. And she uses that creativity actually in her role and in her content to bring up new ideas and think outside the box. And that's exactly why we asked her to come in today to talk about ideation, to talk about different ideas and how to put those into practice. And I think that's actually one of the hardest things. I know I've mentored at a bunch of hackathons, is it's, what am I trying to solve?
Yeah.
Really, what is the issue? Don't come up with a solution first, as tempting as that may be. Instead, look around you, figure out what impact you want to make, what problems you want to solve, and then you can work to find your solution.
You know, the coolest thing, and you might not know this because Don and I do some other shows sometimes, and I have sat in a room with this poor woman for a long time. I feel bad for her. But one of the coolest things that I've learned from Donna is give yourself permission to do the thing.
Yes.
Do the thing. And I would be like, I'm worried about this. And Donna's like, why? Just go do it. And that is super inspiring. Do the thing. That's what she always has told me, even in private. Super cool. And it's time now, I think, to turn it over to Donna. Donna, are you there?
That's Morgan. Hello, everyone. I will say yes, do the thing, unless it's horrible dad joke set, in which case do not.
She's told me no on that a couple of times.
Extra no, like no. All right, Imagine Cuppers, thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, Imagine Cup, we are having our 20th anniversary celebration. That's why you have this lineup of super fans of Imagine Cup and super fans of all of you. And we want to just spend today imparting all of the random information in our heads and give them to you so that you don't make our same mistakes. And that way you can go and make different mistakes and then impart your knowledge onto the next generation. What I want to talk to you today about are bad ideas. Okay? Bad ideas, not good ideas. Everyone's always like, Donna, I need a good idea. What is a good idea? I'm like, forget good ideas. Good ideas are terrible. Bad ideas. All right. So I will tell you a short story of something that happened to me recently. About 3 months ago, I was asked to head up the accessibility tech team for Microsoft. So what this means is I work with all of the product teams at Microsoft, so Windows and Azure and Office and Power Platform and Teams, and make sure that their products are accessible to everybody, not just people who have perfect eyesight, not just people who live in Seattle, Washington, but to everybody. Now, the big question for me was, why me? Why me, Donna? Am I being tapped? Why am I being asked? Why am I being offered this position? I had a dream job before, right? I used to run the advocacy team for the Power Platform, which is a low-code platform. I loved it. I got to build my dream team. I got to work with amazing people. It was so just extraordinary. But the universe brought me this opportunity, and I was very drawn to the space. And right now you're seeing on the screen, just like this weird blue thing. It's like, this is me drawn to something. And I kept asking myself the question, I'm not blind, I'm not deaf, I don't use a wheelchair, I don't have limited mobility in my hands. So why do I belong in the accessibility space? Because how can I truly put myself into the shoes, the hearts and minds of people with disabilities and help build better products for them? Why me? Then something interesting happened. I started doing research. And right now, what we're seeing on the slide is a bunch of information, and I'm going to talk through it with you. There are right now over 1 billion people in the world with disabilities. And this is people who have disclosed, meaning said, hey, I have a disability. And they fall into a bunch of categories. I actually think this number is way higher than 1 billion people. I think most people either don't know they have one or they don't really want to talk about it. So let's talk about some of these categories of disabilities. One is visual. This is things like someone might be colorblind, they might be low vision, or they might be blind. A lot of people as they get older, not any of you probably, but a lot of people as they get older start to lose their eyesight. This comes with age and accidents and things that may happen. So people get reading glasses, then they get bifocals, and they get other glasses. I wear glasses right now, so this has happened to me. I'm sure you know quite a few people who are colorblind who may not even know it. Apparently, 1 in 12 men are colorblind, but often they don't know it. Ever since I took this job, I've had maybe about 25 different men reach out and say, hey, did you know I was colorblind? I didn't learn that until recently. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Next category is hearing. So this is people who may have hearing loss, who may be hard of hearing, like they may use hearing aids to hear, or they might be deaf, capital D deaf, where they communicate through lip reading or sign language. My boss, Jenny Leigh Fleury, is deaf, capital D. So whenever we have a meeting, she usually has a sign interpreter there who is signing whatever we are saying. And she's also a very good lip reader. So in one-on-ones, she tends to lip read. The third category is cognitive. Cognitive disability was a new concept for me. We also call it neurodiversity. And this means people who have something that I have, which is dyslexia. Dyslexia is where your words get letters and words and numbers get all mixed up and you see something that's not there. This kept happening to me. This happens to me all the time, but it really happens to me when I'm giving a presentation. If there's a teleprompter with some words on it, I will not be able to read what it says. Also in the cognitive area of disability, there's autism, people who are on the autism spectrum, as well as ADHD. These two are actually quite common in people who study technology because people who have these kinds of disabilities tend to get a little bit frustrated at traditional school, like read lots of passages, memorize them, take tests on them. So they tend to become a lot more creative and work in worlds of tech, 3D, all of these kind of more creative fields. So people with ADHD and autism find really good homes in the tech industry. Fourth category is speech. So this is a person who may have a speech impediment. So that looks like stutter. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has a speech impediment. He's very open about it. And someone who may not speak at all. They may speak through technology. They may speak through interpreters. They may speak through other methods. The fifth category is mobility. So this is someone who may have a spinal cord injury. They might be a quadriplegic. If you all remember, there's someone named Christopher Reeve. He played Superman. He had an accident and he used a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And mobility actually comes in the form of arthritis as well. So if anyone has worked in technology for a long time, they may get carpal tunnel syndrome in their elbows or in their wrists and hands, or they might have arthritis like I do. It's inherited from my dad. Thanks, Dad. So you may know many people who have these kinds of disabilities that are not super obvious. And the last one is neural. So these are what we call mental health. So people who may have depression, anxiety, PTSD, that sort of thing. So you can see why I believe that disability actually impacts a lot more people than we think. So I actually think 1 in 2 people are impacted by a disability of some sort. Either they have it or someone they love or who's in their life have it. And if you think about your life, that might actually be true, right? It's definitely true for me. My world looks like this. Right now, we're looking at a screen with a bunch of words that are mixed up. When I'm looking at a teleprompter and I see the sentence, my world looks like this, mine will look like that thing on the left, which are a bunch of mishmash of letters. And if you saw that mishmash of letters, you would think, what does this say? And my world looks like that a lot of the time. When I'm stressed, when I'm looking at a teleprompter, when there's a lot of attention on me, that's how my world looks. So it's a little bit terrifying. Now, the question I have been asking myself recently is this: how can we make everyone aware of the benefits of accessibility, right? Because disability affects so many people, there's this amazing little superpower called accessibility, assistive tech. How can we make everyone aware of the benefits and all of the opportunities? Assistive tech is everywhere. It's all around us. Captions on TikTok, assistive tech. Glasses, assistive tech. Having those handles on the sides of stairs so you can hold on to them, assistive tech. These are all assistive tech, and they're everywhere, all around us. So I decided to come up with a framework. I've been using this framework for a while, but I introduced it to my team just this week, and it is called the 100 Bad Ideas. You can find my write-up on it at aka.ms Bad Ideas blog. So if you go to the Bad Ideas blog, you'll see the detailed write-up. So go ahead and take a screenshot of this page right now or go to the site. That way you'll have it later and I'll walk you through the idea. aka.ms/Bad Ideas blog. Okay, so how the 100 Bad Ideas process works is this. You start with, what is the problem or question that you're trying to answer or solve? So the problem I'm trying to solve, Idana, is how can I get more people aware of accessibility and assistive tech all up? That is the question. People all throughout Microsoft, we have 180,000 employees, but also all of you in our community. How can I make all of this information that I've been gaining more easily available to people so they can use it or help people in their communities use it? That is the problem or question. Second thing is I built like legitly a framework. I use an Excel spreadsheet for this, but you can use anything you want. This problem that we're looking at on the screen right now is not answers to the accessibility problem. It's for something else that I'd done previously in my team for Power Platform. Now, the method is this. You and your team, or you could do it by yourself too, list as many ideas as you have to solve that problem. Ideally, what you do is you go find your customer, the person who has this problem. It might be you, it might be someone on your team, it might be someone else, and bring them into this group. Like Scott talked to you a lot about how to build teams and groups. Your customer should definitely be a part of the team, even if they're a virtual member of the team and you call them sometimes. When you're going to solve a problem, make sure you know exactly who the customer is. If you cannot name their name, like what is their name, you don't actually know who the customer is or know if this is the problem. So once you have your team, everyone just write down ideas. The question that I asked my team previously that we did this exercise for was, how do you upskill the general population with Power Platform? We wanted everyone in the world to know about low-code technology. We're like, we think low-code can help lots of people. How can we make more people aware that the Power Platform exists? And you can see that some of the ideas, pretty bad. Okay, ready? I'm going to read you some of them. 1, get a power tour bus off of eBay, hook up with laptops and Wi-Fi, drive around the country, skilling people in various cities. Also can be done in a train with boxcars. That was my idea, of course, you can see. So the ideas have categories. There's idea, there's the suggester who came up with it. There's the like, as in I like this idea. There's the sponsor, meaning who wants to sponsor this idea, who wants to lead the idea. And then there's priorities, like do now or do later. It's really important with ideas not to rule things out right away. Just get them all down, because once you come up with somewhere above 25 ideas, good ideas start to emerge. You'll see if you read down this spreadsheet, and I'll read you some more of them, the ideas actually start to become good. So from my terrible Power Tour Bus idea, there's infiltrate community colleges and add Intro to Power Platform as a continuing education course. That's actually a really good idea. We should probably do that. Then you're back to my ideas. Grab an unused cruise ship and dock up to Chile and upskill everyone in Power using our bad Spanish. Now, this idea came because I saw all the cruise ships are unused and hanging out in the ports. I'm like, can I have one of those? Because this could make an amazing Power Platform school. Of course, we'd probably go to jail and get arrested, so don't do that. But it led to other ideas, like Greg came up with, let's have a 24/7 Discord server where people can find one of us that's willing to help. Greg came up with, let's have a show that runs on actual TV. April came up with, let's have a Udacity course. Let's write a Power Platform for Dummies book. Let's teach Power Platform through TikTok. These are really, really good ideas. Some of these are excellent. But it starts with coming up with something really, really terrible. So how can you do it? First, remember Scott's thing from last time, gather up a team, right? Find people to work with. So all of you thinking about Imagine Cup, reach out to people who go to your school, who are in your community, and say, hey, do you want to get together and build a team? Once you have the right people, then the idea and everything else kind of falls into place, okay? So get your team together, then figure out who is the customer that you'd like to help, and make sure your customer is a part of your team, all right? Then sit down and do the exercise. Come up with 100 bad ideas. Make an Excel spreadsheet, have it be shared, or you can create a Microsoft form and everyone submits their ideas and then auto-generates a spreadsheet with the ideas in it. You could do that too. Just come up with ideas. Just go. Don't filter yourself, right? Don't filter yourself. A lot of people are like, oh, this is a stupid idea, so I don't want to say it. You don't have to say it. Just write them down. Who cares? The point is that they're bad. It's called a bad ideas experiment because the ideas are bad. So once you go through and come up with 100 bad ideas, come up with at least 25, right? Come up with somewhere between 25 and 100. Then go through and vote. Like, I like this idea. I like this idea. I like this idea. And anything that you feel deeply passionate about, you're like, I really want to do this. I really want to run the experiment. Then vote to sponsor the idea. Okay, put your name down next to sponsor. Sponsor meaning I will come up with the exact plan or the experiment for how to try the idea. Because from idea comes an experiment. Say my idea was to go drive around the country and teach Power Platform to people. The experiment would be, let's just get in a car and go to a nearby town and seeing if we can set up an after school program or go to a community college and set up in the parking lot, right? That would be the experiment rather than committing to driving around to the entire country. And then you decide which of your ideas are you doing now, as in this week, and which of these ideas do you want to do later. And don't get into the practice of just crossing things out and saying we're never going to do them, because honestly, you never know. So what happened with accessibility? I am fully in it right now. I ran the 100 Bad Ideas experiment with my team on Tuesday, just Tuesday of this week. We have 125 bad ideas. Some of them are really, really good. The next phase will be to kick off probably 25 experiments. There are 30 plus people on my team, so we can do 25 experiments. We're going to reach out to our communities. Many people in our community have disabilities and they really want to help do some of these experiments. One of them I'll be reaching out to is pictured here. His name is Florian Bayers, and he's a very enthusiastic dev, and he really wants more people to be aware of accessibility. So my team is going to go forth now, and we're going to do the thing. And I really encourage you to create teams, find your customer, and do the thing. Thank you so much. Seth and Morgan. No, you want to keep talking? I will.
We are here. How are you, my
We're here,
friend?
Donna.
Awesome.
Speaking of bad ideas, letting them let me host was, I don't know what spreadsheet that was on, Donna. So here's a question for you.
Yes.
How do you, because look, I've been in studios with you, we've sat there and I've been like, hey, I'm worried about this. And you're always like, look, Seth, just do it. How do you get into that mindset to overcome that trepidation? How do you do that?
So here is my thought on that. First, I believe everything is either a win or it's a learn, right? Say you try a thing. Seth is like, today I'm going to wear orange. Either it's a win, like, yeah, Seth, you look great in orange. You should wear orange every day. Or everyone's like, that was interesting. And Seth has learned something, which is don't wear orange. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Either way, it's going to be a good story, right? And honestly, good stories come from failures. Some of my favorite stories are the time I tried a thing, it was a fiasco, but it's still a really good story. So Scott talked to you about storytelling. Seth is also going to talk to you about storytelling. But often the best stories are the ones where there was a fiasco. And sometimes it's, a story is hero's journey. It's like hero has a problem, they try something, it's a disaster, they try again, it's a disaster. You've seen like all of those sports movies, like they fail. They don't win in the first 5 minutes and then the movie's over. They fail, they suck, they go lift weights, they run around the track, then they win at the end. So people love to hear stories like that. And I always believe myself to be in frame one of every movie, which is like, here's an opportunity, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You'll fail, you'll look dumb, you'll look stupid. Okay, that's all right, because at the end of it, you're going to have a really good story.
Does
that make sense?
Very true. Very true. And actually, a question for you
Yes.
before we get back to Donna.
Yes.
Can you pull off orange?
I
Yes,
guess that's
this is
something
the
I will either have to succeed at
Uh-huh.
or learn. Are we talking like snow cone or like traffic cone orange?
Yeah,
Or,
like
what are we-
traffic cone orange.
Yeah, I
yeah.
can pull it off. I mean,
There you go.
I mean, I think so.
We're going to have to go find a traffic cone.
Here's another question, Donna, from the audience. My question is, how would we know that our idea does really make an impact for the community?
So the best way is to work with actual customers. And lucky for you, Travis, who is coming up next, is going to teach you exactly how to do that using the method that he uses every day. Travis leads like detailed workshops on how people can make sure that their customer has a seat, like literally a physical seat at the table when we're coming up with ideas for features and products. And he's going to walk you through the process they use, which is a really good process. We've used it in the Windows team, we use it in the Power Platform team. I use it all the time. He's written this amazing book. I actually went to his workshop and took like 30 pages of notes around it. I write everything down because bad ideas. But the way to make sure is to work with the customer from the beginning. Like I'm doing this work with accessibility right now. How do we make our dev tools more accessible for people with disabilities? You know what I'm not going to do is go convince the teams to implement a bunch of features without testing with customers first. Like there's no way, because I want to guarantee the success of my idea. And the way to do that is to test with your customers from phase one, from the second the idea comes into your head. Bring the customer into the equation and say, what do you think? Is this going to work? Yes, no. And once you test with one customer, then test with another. Make sure you don't start failing the first customer. Then test with another, then test with another. Test with at least 5 people before you know if your idea is going to work. That's my model.
I think that is excellent advice. And whether you're doing something on your own or whether you're working on a product, I think at least 5 people is a good way, because everybody's different and everybody has different use cases and needs. And I think it's also really important to find a really diverse group of people to ask questions to and test your products and ideas out with. So excellent advice. And actually, Donna, it's funny that you have your notebook. I have Travis's book right here, and we'll get into this in a minute. But we do have another question for you from the chat, if you have a moment for us.
I do.
Wonderful. So this question is, I gave an idea to my manager, and he did not accept it. Why? And so they want to know, how do you turn a no into a yes?
Such a good question. So I actually think it's time to debug this a little bit, right? You're like, okay, I gave an idea to my manager and they said no. Did they give any explanation, right? I always like to ask more questions. Hey, say I'm pitching my boss. Hey, Jenny, I think we should steal the Clippy costume from Building 25. You should put it on and go to various teams meetings and talk about accessibility. Jenny will say, no, I'm not doing that. And I'll say, why? And the key is to debug it a little bit, right? What is it that you're trying to do? The reason I want her to do this is because I want more people to be aware of accessibility. So I would ask her the question, I'm like, do we agree that we want more people to be aware of accessibility? Yes, we agree on that. So go back to common ground, right? Right now, you and your manager feel like at opposite sides of the table. Get back on the same side of the table, okay? It's you two versus a problem, okay? Remember, your manager's generally on your side. That's their job. So you two facing the problem. You say, can we agree that we want to do X, whatever the problem is you're trying to solve? Make sure you're really clear on the problem. Mine would be, Can we agree we want more people to be aware of accessibility? Yes. Can we agree that we have to try some, like, let's say stunts or some shenanigans or some slightly wild ideas to make it stick? She'll say, I can get behind that. I'm like, okay, cool. So we're still on the same side of the table. We're still agreeing. We're still nodding. Then pitch your idea and say, and now the Clippy costume. She's like, no, I draw the line at the Clippy costume. So it's not that your manager's saying the problem is not real. It's that the idea to solve it may not be it. So together you can come up with a better solution, but to solve the same problem. So at this point, I'll say, fine, you don't have to wear the Clippy costume. I'll wear the Clippy costume, which case she'll say, please do that.
So here's a question, and I want to talk about accessibility because for some reason, people equate accessibility with perhaps maybe disabilities, but that's not even remotely the case. It's all about access. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we tend to put the words together where we say people with disabilities need accessibility. And that is true. But all people need accessibility, actually. So accessibility to me is making things easier for everybody in the world to use. All right. The example I will give you is curb cuts. And they're actually called curb cuts, where in the side of a sidewalk, you'll see that the sidewalk will slope onto the street, right? This is awesome for if you're a klutz like me, if you're dragging a suitcase, if you're carrying something heavy, if you, if you happen to be pushing a stroller, or if you're in a wheelchair. So they were designed for someone with a disability, someone in a wheelchair, but we all use them. We use them all the time. The same thing with captions. Captions were invented so people who are deaf can read what's going on the screen. But how many of you watch TikTok videos with captions? Everyone does, because TikTok video makers put captions on everything. And the reason is because when you have captions on a video, the SEO goes up a lot, since it's way easier to actually go and parse and index what's in the file if you have words written down associated with it. It becomes metadata. So if you put captions on video, your discoverability goes up. So all video makers have started to put captions on things. And it's also really good for people who may not have headphones right now, may have lost them, may not feel like putting them in, may like to focus better, may speak a different language. Captions are just good all up. Not all of those people have disabilities, but they use accessibility, assistive tech, to consume whatever is being shown.
Well, Donna, this has been awesome. I appreciate that. Love working with Donna. Hopefully I'll get to work with you sometime soon if you'll have me talk to you. She's really cool.
There's a bad idea.
All right, so now we're going to Travis, who's going to talk about being customer driven. He's awesome. Let's go to you, Travis. You there?
There we go. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, dude.
Hey, Travis.
Yes. Wow. I'm having a moment. I need to pause here and just soak it in. If you would have told the younger me that someday I would be sharing a virtual stage with the likes of the legendary Scott Hanselman or following the super talented and creative Donna Sarkar, wow. And one of my favorite leaders on the planet is coming up next, Amanda Silver. Microsoft has given me a ton of pinch me, I must be dreaming moments throughout my career, and I can definitely add this one to the list. So special thanks to Morgan, Seth, of course, and the entire Imagine Cup team. It's really, really an honor to be here today. But y'all are probably thinking, who the heck are you? My name is Travis Laudermuck. I'm a UX researcher for the developer division, which means I study human-computer interaction. Essentially, my job is to help the company appreciate how technology affects us as humans. And I have to apologize to all my friends and colleagues, but I have the coolest job at the company. And so if you're interested in human-computer interaction, look it up. It's an awesome field, and I highly encourage you to check it out. The developer division is the group at Microsoft responsible for developer tools and services. Products, of course, you're probably familiar with that I've had the honor to work on over the years: Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio for the Mac. But before joining Microsoft, I was a developer just like you. And I remember attending Microsoft events like this one, and it'd be so inspiring. You'd check out all the new technology, platform announcements, watching all those super smooth coding demos that Scott and others would do. And they always just seemed to build perfectly without a hitch. And I'd go back to my desk and I'd be all inspired, and I'd fire up a fresh new project in Visual Studio, and my mind was buzzing with all the possibilities of where the code might take me. And I remember those days. It's such a fun time. But I also remember that other feeling that I would get. Perhaps you've had this feeling as well. Typically it comes, several weeks later, maybe even months later, when I'm knee deep in the forest of all my coding decisions and bug fixes, looking over the incredible amount of hours I've invested in the project. And I start to get that, that creeping voice in the back of your head, the one that goes, is anybody going to even use this? Who's going to use this thing? I think it's cool, but how am I going to get anybody else to use this, right? And it's in those moments I think of that, that classic scene in the 1993 box office smash hit Jurassic Park. If you haven't seen it, Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, is talking to John Hammond. He's the creator of a park of real dinosaurs brought to life from unearthed ancient DNA. And it's in this scene that Malcolm makes an astute observation. And this is right before the dinosaurs break out and start eating everyone. But he makes this observation that seems to have eluded all the brilliant top scientists that are working at that park.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Right. And that's kind of the thought I get. I go, I was so preoccupied with whether or not I could build this thing. I never stopped to think if I should build it, right? And that's when I start to realize I got ahead of myself. I fell in love with implementing the technology. And sure, I've got an elegant solution that I'm really proud of. But now I've got to do the hard work of finding somebody who needs it. And essentially, I've built a solution in search of a problem. And so what I want to do with the rest of the time that I have with you is I want to talk about something that is so important to the development of any product. It's more critical than any technology choice you're going to make. It's more important than any business decision that the future you will calculate. It's the single most important factor that will determine your success or failure. And it's this. And Scott touched on this earlier. The ability to truly understand, articulate, and accurately predict the feelings of someone else, how someone else might experience what you're building. And empathy is a uniquely human skill that can't be produced or replicated by any technology. Well, at least yet anyway. I'm sure our friends over at Microsoft Research are trying to work out an AI bot that can simulate empathy, but we can't do it yet. But the point is, connecting with other human beings, seeking to understand them, is the key source of product innovation. But don't take my word for it. How about this? Listen to someone that is infinitely smarter than I am.
When I think about innovation, the word that comes to mind for me is empathy. Because if you think about the source of innovation, it's all about being able to meet the unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. And in order for us to be able to do that successfully, you need to have empathy. And to me, empathy is not something you go to work and switch on the button called empathy. It's more about being able to let life teach you how to become more empathetic, how to listen beyond even the words from your customers and partners, and then innovate. And that to me is what drives innovation.
Sorry about that. I was probably drinking. I took a moment to take a little drink break there. I love that man. And what a great quote. It really is the spirit of what we're trying to do at Microsoft. It's the operating equation. We take the empathy that we generate from connecting with our customers, and we combine that empathy with the growth mindset. You keep hearing that term today, to come up with solutions that will ultimately delight and inspire our customers. Okay, so what does this use of empathy look like in practice? And I want to give you an example, and it's actually an example from a different company, and it's a completely different product. It's razors, Gillette razors, to be more specific. Now, if you're not familiar with Gillette, they're the member of Procter & Gamble, one of the largest producers of consumer products in the world. Gillette does roughly $6 billion in sales every year, and its brand recognition, Gillette, is worth over $14 billion. And I want to tell you the story of this gentleman. His name is Chip Bergh. He is now the CEO of Levi Strauss, which is an American denim and clothing company. But back in 2005, he was heading up Gillette's blades and razors business. And Procter & Gamble had spent over $50 billion to acquire Gillette. And it was Chip's job to not only integrate them successfully within the company, but also to look for innovative business opportunities that they could now go after now that Gillette was part of the family. And one of the areas of opportunity that Procter & Gamble had identified early on was targeting developing markets of the world where Gillette had yet to start offering its products. You see, Procter & Gamble has a long history and rich culture around ethnographic and qualitative research. They have rigorous processes in place to study human behavior to help inform them about potential product solutions. And this type of ethnographic research was really a new process for Gillette, who had prided themselves on their ability to collect quantitative research, facts and figures, analytics, data, numbers data. Essentially, they had analytics to tell them what people were buying, but they didn't have any processes or methods to tell them why they were buying it, right? And so Chip knew that if Procter & Gamble were going to grow Gillette's business, they needed to use the scale that Procter & Gamble could provide to reach new markets. So he set his sights on India, where there was an emerging market that Gillette had yet to tap into. So Chip had a crazy idea. He said, we're going to take the entire Gillette team, and the first thing I want them to do is spend 2 weeks in India. I want them to live with these people, these consumers, and I want them to go into their homes. I want them to understand how they shave and how shaving fits into their lives. And the Gillette team really wasn't convinced. In fact, Bergh says that a really highly respected senior scientist from the Gillette team asked, I don't understand why we got to go to India. We have a ton of Indian men living right outside our door here in America. Can't we just recruit them? But Bergh wasn't convinced. He needed the team to really go to India because it was the right thing to do, even though it was going to be time consuming and even expensive. And so that's what the team did. They flew all the way to India, and they spent their time talking with men, asking about their shaving routines, directly observing their behaviors, and discussing their purchasing decisions. And as it turns out, Chip was right. The team had learned a lot, but there was one learning that stood out to them in particular. See, the team had observed many men shaving, and while they shaved, to their utter shock, they were actually using a small cup of cold water to shave. And you see, men didn't have easy access to hot running water. So as a convenience, they would just put, some water in a cup and it would get cold. But the thing is when you shave with cold water, at least with these razors, they become clogged, and it really actually created a miserable shaving experience. And the team never thought to consider this, right? They just assumed that men in India shaved like all of them back home. They hadn't considered that many of them might not have access to warm running water, or at least easy access to it. And so this was a huge revelation to the team, and they were completely transformed by this insight. And in fact, that skeptical scientist from earlier, Bergh actually says that the scientist reached out to him many months later, and apparently he had spent 3 days with this one man. He told the story, and he had immersed himself in this man's life. He followed him to the grocery store, watched how he shopped. He went to the barber shop with him, hung out with his family, really got to know him. And it was through these interactions that he began to realize why it was so important to go to India, that there was just nothing in the books, in the data that they had back at home that truly brought this experience to life for him. And in fact, he was so inspired that he started designing a new razor as soon as he got back on the plane on his flight home to London. He literally started drawing it on the back of a napkin. And he started thinking about all the time that he had spent there and what these people would want in a razor. Right. And so he started thinking, a new razor should have a single blade system with a safety comb to prevent nicks and scratches. And it also would have an easy to rinse cartridge, that would perform better in that cold water. And the razor would cost only 15 rupees, which is about 20 cents US. And the replacement blades would be even cheaper at 5 rupees, which is about 6 cents US. And this is certainly, if you shave here in America, you buy Gillette in America, that is much less expensive than the options that we have here in America. But the team learned how to appeal to the type of men that they had spent time with in India. And they had learned what these consumers valued. And it was clear to them that these men were much more price conscious when it came to grooming products in particular than their counterparts in America. And this was another huge insight that was just simply impossible to gather sitting from their offices in America. Well, the product eventually became known as the Gillette Guard Razor, and it was a huge success. In fact, within 3 short months, it became the best-selling razor in all of India. So it's just really an example of how you can get insights by spending time with people. Donna actually spoke about that just a moment ago. But what can we learn from this example? So there's a lot of lessons, of course, but the one that stands out to me the most is how Procter & Gamble and Gillette were able to find alignment for what was valuable for the customer, but also what was valuable for their business. And it's been my experience that strategy will win every single time. But it's hard, right? It's hard to find that alignment of like what you want to build and what you want to do, and finding that alignment with what customers need or people out there in the world need from you, right? And so how do we find that alignment? Well, I want to talk a little bit about that. My colleagues and I created a framework that we use right here in the developer division to answer these fundamental questions. It's called the Hypothesis Progression Framework. It's HPF for short. Okay, and it breaks down the development of any product. It doesn't matter. You could be working on razors or a mobile app or a children's book. It really doesn't matter what you're working on. But to think about it in these 5 stages can be really, really helpful. Customer, problem, concept, feature, and business. And essentially each stage addresses a fundamental question. At the customer stage, we're trying to determine if real customers exist. We're trying to understand who they are, what motivates them, and what tasks they're engaging in. But fundamentally, we want to ensure that there's a market there, right, worth addressing. In the case of the Gillette team, they were trying to uncover what motivates these men in India. When do they shave? How often do they do it? What products do they buy? And what do they, which products do they choose over another, and why? In the problem stage, we're trying to uncover the constraints and limitations that might be preventing these customers from reaching their goals. So the Gillette team was thinking about the lack of hot running water, right? And how that would create a negative experience with their current product offerings. And once you start to identify with the customer you're targeting and you start to get clear on what problem you're trying to help them with, we can start to create and ideate concepts, right? Things, ideas that could potentially solve the problem for them. But we also want to make sure we're doing so, the thing that we're creating is actually valuable for the customers, right? And so the scientists, we talked about how he was sketching an early design with the Gillette Guard Razor. The team could continue iterating on that idea, some early mock-ups and that sort of thing, and having conversations with the men that they had met in India to make sure that they've captured that this was the valuable concept, that this was the thing that was going to solve the problem for them. And it's an important point that, having these discussions along the way, right? It's not like we went and talked to the folks in India, then we go back to the lab and we start building the thing and we forget about them. No, we keep that relationship going and checking in with them and saying, hey, bring them into the process and co-design with them, right? Is a really powerful solution. And some of you might be familiar with the term minimum viable product, or MVP. This is like the notion when you start to get an idea that comes together and you start to understand what does it have to be minimally viable. In other words, what is the bare bones thing that we have to build to actually create value for our customers, right? And as that starts to emerge, as you're working through, in this case, maybe the sketches and early mock-ups of this razor, and we're talking with our customers and we start to land on it, we start to understand, okay, it has to have that single cartridge system. Like that's a deal breaker if we don't have it, right? And so we want to keep testing and development of these things. But we also, as we go to build it and we bring it to reality, again, we're continually bringing the customers along the way, checking in with them. Maybe we have some early prototypes from manufacturing. Can you shave with this? Can you try it? Tell me what you think, right? And in a case of coding, hey, take a look at this login screen. I want you to go through it, right? I want to see if you can register for the app, right? These types of things are really important to get that feedback along the way. And finally, we're always looking for what we're doing, and we're measuring it to make sure that we're getting the business outcome of what we're introducing. In Gillette's case, of course, they're going to be tracking the sales of the Gillette Guard Razor, right? And making sure that, things are moving in a positive direction. So if you look at this, hopefully what you start to appreciate, there's a lot here, but essentially there's these 5 stages, right, that you're looking at across anything that you're building. We call this the hypothesis progression framework because inside each of these stages, there's a hypothesis template. And our teams use these, and you can absolutely use these as well. It's a sort of fill-in-the-blank structure that helps our product teams identify and articulate their assumptions about a space that they're developing for. And having a record of what you're learning along the way, Scott talked about having, a journal, right? And writing things down, right? These hypotheses in your journal and keep track of them. Right? And keeping track of that story along the way, what you validated and invalidated is so critical because it helps us remember the value of the changes that we're making with our product, right? And whether or not it's moving us forward or moving us backwards, right? And each of the highlighted words that you see here, type of customer, job to be done, problem, hypothesis, we call these hypothesis parameters. And essentially, they're vital components that come together to help us have an accurate understanding. Right. So, for example, with Gillette, if they were just talking with men in India, calling them up and, they didn't go there. Right. And they were just asking them over the phone, about their shaving habits and this sort of thing, why they chose certain razors over the other. They may have uncovered some insights that would be helpful. It certainly would be better than not talking to them at all, but they wouldn't have uncovered that most important insight. Right. The notion that they were actually shaving with a cup of cold water, right? And it wasn't until they watched the men shaving that they understood that job to be done. And that's what Clayton Christensen, he's a Harvard professor and author, he talks about that being the job to be done, right? We hire these jobs, these things to help us with our motivations and goals. Looks like we have a question here for Imagine Cup participants. Should the customer be a physical part of the conversation in every phase of the hypothesis progression framework? I think if you are an Imagine Cup participant and you are going for the goal of winning, the customer should be integral to your story. And so that's going to talk a lot about storytelling and all that stuff. You should be as best you can. We'll talk a little bit here in a second about, talking with customers, but as best as you can, they should be an integral part of your story. They don't have to be physically represented per se, but you should absolutely, if you can include the story of your customer, why you're building what you're building, who is it for, what motivates that customer, that potential customer, what are they trying to achieve, what is their goals and aspirations, and what problem that you're helping solve, that is a critical component of your story, right? Now, product development is messy, so it's not like everything we're working on starts from left to right, right? We don't always start every project with, okay, let's go talk to the customers. Okay, now we've found some customers, so let's start talking about problems. Okay, now, no, we actually move from left to right, middle out, right, left. So it doesn't matter necessarily where your idea is at the current moment, right? Think about these stages and think about where your gaps of knowledge are, right? Maybe you really are crisp on knowing who you're developing for, right? But maybe we haven't gotten so crisp on exactly what problem we're trying to solve, right? And what you want to do is you want to fall into this cadence where we're build, measure, learning, or formulating, experimenting, and sense making. Essentially, we're formulating our assumptions into hypotheses, right? And then we're going to run some small experiments. Donna talked about this earlier, getting out, and actually having people try and respond to what we're building and get their feedback, right? Running those experiments. And then we try to step back every now and again and make sense of what we've learned, right? Because if we're not careful, we fall into this pattern of build, measure, right? And we're not taking stock of what we've learned over the trajectory of the product. So yeah, I got the framework here, but here's the message that I really want you to pick up on here. One of the most important things that you can do as a maker of any product is you have to step back from the computer screen, right? And you got to spend some time with your fellow humans. Now, I know that COVID has made this difficult as of late, and I would argue that because of COVID, this is why this is so critical in this moment in time, right? We can't forget how to relate to one another, right? And so the more time that you can spend with others, safely, of course, use Teams, Zoom, Google Hangouts, FaceTime, whatever, to get in contact with folks. Create communities, just like Donna said, look out into your own communities. That is your resource. But having that level of interest will help you generate the kind of empathy and inspiration that's required for you to tell your story, right? So important. And like Satya said earlier, we want to let life teach us how to become more empathetic. I can't agree more. We got to listen beyond the words of our customers. We got to be intuitive enough to see the problems, just like the Gillette team did, right? They were looking and observing with their eyes. Nobody told them about the cold cup of water. They saw it for themselves, right? And perhaps you're living in a small town right now, similar to the small town that I grew up in. I grew up in a small town in California, farming town. And back then I thought, technology was so out of reach. I was surrounded by farmers and dust and cows, right? And no one in my town cared about technology. And I thought, I can't wait to get out of here and, go be with like-minded individuals. But you know what? If I was to go back now and talk to the younger me, first I'd probably tell them to, wear nicer clothes and stop painting your fingernails and bleaching your hair. But that's a story for another day. But I would tell the younger me, you know what? This isn't an obstacle. This is an opportunity. You live in a community that could be completely radically changed by technology. So go spend time with those farmers, those small business owners. Learn from them. Understand their needs. And maybe, just maybe, you might see something like a cold cup of water, right? That could be revolutionized. Right? In fact, we talk about this with our colleagues here in Developer Division all the time. In our employee onboarding customer-driven workshop that you heard about, we tell our new employees we need them to be mindful of the 3 vital behaviors: awareness, curiosity, and courage. Right? Because it's the foundation for where our most innovative ideas come from. Awareness is required in successful product development because each of us needs to be able to identify and be made aware of our own biases. We process the entire world through a single lens, our own, right? And our perceptions are shaped by our own lived experiences and the interactions we have with others along the way. You've been hearing this from Scott and Donna and others, right? Like the most important thing that you can bring to any coding project is other humans. Right? Because if we're going to solve the future problems of humanity, it requires the very best that humanity has to offer, right? So don't leave other people out of the equation. As tempting as it can be when you get in behind that keyboard and you start writing that code, it can be an isolating experience. So take time to step away and take stock of your assumptions. Why am I building this? Who is this for? Have I verified or validated that that's actually how the world exists out there? Maybe I should talk to some folks. And that's where curiosity comes up, right? Because being aware of our own biases and perceptions is the first step, but the next step is fostering that constant curiosity and desire for learning. One of the coolest things about working at Microsoft is I'm surrounded by people who never stop their quest of learning. # growth mindset. That's what we're all about here. I've had the incredible opportunity to meet some pretty senior people at this company, even Satya himself for a brief moment. And it blows me away. Him and leaders and all these really talented people, they are on a quest to learn the next big thing, right? And one of the quickest ways to doom your project to failure, I can tell you this right now because I've spent lots of time with product teams all over the world, is they convince themselves that they've got it all figured out, right? So stay hungry and ask questions. Scott talked about this, right? Ask questions and never stop your quest for learning. It's critically important to being an excellent software developer. And finally, one of the most important factors of product success is courage. You got to have courage to experiment with something new. And I understand when you're young, like it's hard to develop that kind of courage because the voice inside your head is telling you, oh, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to fail, like you're wasting your time, you're never going to be successful. Honestly, the voice in your head is the biggest critic. It's the hardest one to keep quiet. So you got to have courage to experiment with something new, talk to new people, expand your network, right? To ensure that you're not biasing yourself with your own worldview. Be inquisitive. People love talking about themselves. It's the one trait that we all possess, right? So take an interest in them, ask questions, And it's one of the hardest things oftentimes is the courage to admit that you're working on something that isn't meeting the needs of your customers, right? Having the courage to pivot or adjust, to scrap something that you've invested a lot of time in, but you've made a new discovery that's just clear that that's not going to work. And so that takes real courage to say, hey, I'm going to pivot and move in a different direction. And every successful entrepreneur that I've had the chance to talk to throughout my career possess these vital behaviors. They're aware of their own knowledge gaps. They're relentless in trying to fill those gaps with curiosity, and they have the courage to admit when they need to adjust their strategy. So I apologize. That's a high-level walkthrough of some of the work that I'm focused on here at Microsoft. But if these topics are of interest to you, we have some books. The Customer-Driven Playbook was a book that I co-authored with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jessica Rich. It outlines that hypothesis progression framework and all the stuff that we do. It's absolutely can be used, even if you don't work at a big company like Microsoft, to help you process through your project, right? So I definitely would take a look at that. The Customer-Driven Culture is a book I co-wrote with my friend and mentor, Dr. Monty Hammontree. It walks you through those 3 vital behaviors that I just discussed and helps you kind of appreciate the spirit and the culture that you really need to have in order to build customer-obsessed products, right? And by the way, both of these books are available free to you. O'Reilly is generously offering a 30-day free trial. There's going to be some communication on how you can take advantage of that. They have a Safari Books online service, essentially. So not only will you get access to these 2 books, but all of the books in O'Reilly's library. So be on the lookout for that. Another book that I want to bring to your attention is one that I wrote called User-Centered Design. And it's a book that I actually wrote before joining Microsoft, and it's specifically targeted to folks just like you, right? You might be thinking, well, I don't have access to a designer or a UX researcher. It's me and my friend, and we're trying to build this thing. Like, how can we possibly engineer experiments on our own? This book is designed specifically for you, right? And it has some really kind of low-cost, easy little experiments, usability studies that you could do today with your project to get feedback and start making iterations. And make sure that's a part of your story when you're talking about your project here at Imagine Cup. And Seth will talk to you more about storytelling in a moment. Here's where you can find me on the things. T. Loudermilk on Twitter. Send me an email. I'll reply, I promise. And you can check out my website at travisloudermilk.com. And if you have questions in the chat, I'm going to look now. I know I was kind of going through what are the characteristics of quality customer service? What is your advice on how to put the customer first? Well, it's that empathy, right? It's really taking a moment and stopping what you need, right, for the product, for the project, and stopping and reflecting on what does the customer need. And it's so easy to kind of get into like, what do we need to do, right, to get this product to market and all the things that we need to adjust, and we need to collaborate with this team, and we got to figure out this technology, and we got to see how we can market over here. Like, we get focused on what it is that we need. And so every now and again, make it a point to stop and think, what does the customer need, right? Hopefully all of us have had some experience with great customer service. Reflect on those experiences, jot them down in your journal, right? And say, what was it about this experience? How did I feel? What was it that they were doing that made this feel special or unique? And how can I learn from that and offer it as well? All right, I'm going to throw it back from there. Thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate your attention today, and best of luck at Imagine Cup.
Thanks so much, Travis. That was an amazing talk. We are so grateful that you joined us today. Definitely check out Travis's books. They are fantastic. And yes, thank you to our friends at O'Reilly. For all of the students registered for the Imagine Cup this year, they are going to get a 30-day free trial. Like Travis mentioned, you can check out his book and all the other books on O'Reilly. And for all of you watching, even if you're not a student, we'll actually be providing a 40% off discount code for Travis's book coming up soon. Make sure you follow Microsoft Imagine Cup on Twitter for upcoming information on that. And now, Seth, we are headed over to one of our amazing leaders of this company who I just have the utmost respect for. She's going to talk a little bit about ideation. Iteration. Can't think of a better person to do it. Welcome, Amanda. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks, Travis, for that amazing talk. I think that's going to become my morning mantra. Really appreciate it. So what I actually want to talk to you about today is iteration, yes, but I also want to talk to you about failure and the moment of failure and how that can actually be a transformational moment for you to actually embrace the growth mindset. So where I want to start is actually sharing with you a little bit of my background. So what you see here is I'm Amanda Silver. I'm the CVP of product for the developer division at Microsoft. And so we work on all of the products that focus on developers as our customers. Up there at the top there, that's me at about 3 years old. And my dad actually started to teach me STEM and math and encourage me to pursue science and technology when I was about that age. He would say to me, you have 3 apples. A gorilla comes along and takes 2 of your apples. How many apples do you have left? And so when I could barely speak, my dad was already trying to teach me math, support my interest in math, science, and technology and engineering. And all 3 of us in that picture, my 2 older brothers and myself, ended up pursuing technology thanks to my dad, who is a theoretical physicist and was trying to, encourage us to do this. We're a really odd family. When we got a little bit older and we wanted our dinner guests to leave, we would earnestly begin quizzing our dad to learn more about string theory and dimensions. And he couldn't resist the bait, and our guests had better things to do with their time, so they would inevitably leave. But we'd get back to those math quizzes. And he'd quiz me, and sometimes I'd get the answer right, and sometimes I'd get it wrong. But when I got it wrong, we'd actually work together to analyze my approach so that I could understand why I wasn't landing on the right answer. And this actually made me comfortable in that moment in knowing that if I didn't get it right that first time, I could actually learn from my mistakes and I would get better at answering it over time. So fast forward a little bit. Years later, that's me. In my first few years at Microsoft, I came straight out of college. A couple of years later, I was speaking at conferences, and even a few years later, I might have spoken in Second Life, which was kind of a virtual reality environment. Maybe a little bit misguided, but hey, it's all about new experiences. But what I love about these pictures is you can actually look at the hardware in the picture, and you can see kind of what was the era that I was actually working in technology. And so that's what I really love about it. The monitor size is a really good indication of what year it was. Over the years, I had many, many technical contributions and actually led to a bunch of different patents and even years later, talking about open source and kind of the shift that Microsoft has made over the past few years to become more of a contributor to open source, which is extremely meaningful for the developer audience, which is the primary audience that I serve. Fast forward even a couple of years after that, and I just want to share with you definitely one of my career highlights. This is Satya talking about our work at one of our conferences.
I want to move up from infrastructure and trust to the next layer, developers. Now, this is obviously very close and near and dear to everyone at Microsoft because this is how we as a company got started building developer tools. But one of the most interesting things that's happening out there is today when you look at the software engineering jobs, 61% of the openings are outside of what is considered the tech industry. In fact, the crossover, the tipping point was 2017. And therefore, our mission that we got started in 1975 is even more important. That is to build the best tool chain, the most complete tool chain for developers. With Visual Studio Code, we have the best IDEs out there. We're doing language innovation like TypeScript. We have Azure DevOps to help you with all of your build and deployment needs. And of course, GitHub is the home for 40+ million open source developers in collaboration in communities. And sort of really bringing all of that is what our goal is. In fact, the use cases, some of the sort of innovations that you will see, I'm really thrilled about. The first one is Visual Studio Online. I mean, you should check this out. Even just last night, I was going and playing with it. I signed up for it. It's a game changer for anyone who struggles on weekends to create your own dev environments. This is a godsend because you now can go to Visual Studio Online. You can get your entire environment provisioned for you with all its dependencies right there, just on a browser on any machine. Another one is IntelliCode. We are using AI, learning from all of the open source code out there on GitHub, and then bringing that intelligence to your editor. As you type your code, it's doing all of the completion so that you can build on the shoulders of giants. And that's a way to drive productivity. Another one is LiveShare. Now, just imagine what it can do for a young developer who joins a team, wants to have some code review or goes consult with a mentor. LiveShare changes the dynamics because no development project is a solo sport. It's always a team sport. So really bringing that next level of innovation with GitHub and LiveShare changes the dynamics and culture of organizations.
So I love that because it definitely highlights a lot of the innovation that we've brought to the space that my team is really trying to serve. Now, some of that was a couple of years ago, and some of the product names have changed. You know, Visual Studio Online that he was speaking about is now called GitHub Codespaces. But you guys can actually go and start your projects really quickly using some of this functionality, and you can even collaborate across the world with your teammates using Visual Studio LiveShare as an example. But I now want to back up real quick, a little bit earlier in my career.
I want to move.
Fail. So let's go back. I had incredible support from my dad through my study of STEM and through kind of learning science and technology and pursuing that in high school and even into college. And then my second semester of college, I was taking the midterm for discrete math, and I failed. I mean, I didn't really fail. I got a C, but to my standards, that was failing. And I got called into the professor's office. And the professor had what he thought was a very serious chat with me. He said, "Look, do you enjoy your computer science classes?" And I was, "Yeah, I really do." And he was like, "Well, if you weren't majoring in computer science, what do you think you would want to do?" And at the time, I was taking a history of photography course. It was really fascinating. And so I said, art history. He said, "Well, maybe you should consider that." So I had an option in that moment. I could take his advice and essentially quit what I was pursuing, or I could continue to persist and try to take that as an opportunity to learn what I could do to get better. And I'm sure that it's based on the support from my dad that actually encouraged me to recognize that even in a case where I get the answer wrong, that I can persist and I can get better and I can learn how to do better. And so in that moment, I actually decided, you know what? I don't need to take advice from this guy. I'm actually going to go and become a TA for that class next year. I'm going to become a TA for the classes that have that class as a prerequisite. And what happened was I ended up spending the next 3 years of college being a TA, a teaching assistant, and helping more and more students to pursue their aspiration to learn computer science and to contribute to creating with technology throughout my next 3 years. And it led to me eventually coming to Microsoft, where I could help millions of developers contribute using and create using technology. And so I think one of the most important things to recognize is that in that moment of failure, you can actually transform that. And you can think about that as a learning opportunity. And so I'm really proud of a lot of the work that we've done recently to bring some curriculum to everyone around how to build tech resilience. And you can check it out on the Microsoft Learn docs, things about growth mindset and self-efficacy and cognitive flexibility. And so I want to share with you one example video that we've developed with this tech resilience that really gets to the nugget of this cognitive flexibility and the idea that you can persist in the face of challenge.
It is probably safe to say that most of us in tech have tried an approach to solving a problem before, only to have it fail entirely. In such moments, not wanting to give up, we ask ourselves, where do I go from here? And at this point, as we try to adapt and pivot, we are using something called cognitive flexibility. The word cognitive comes from a Latin verb that means getting to know or knowledge. So cognitive flexibility refers to the ability to learn or use knowledge in ways that reflects being adaptive and open to change. When faced with an unexpected setback, someone without much cognitive flexibility, not adapting to the situation, might attempt to do the same thing again and again and keep failing, which can make it difficult to persist. On the other hand, by thinking about the situation differently and generating multiple solutions, someone who has more cognitive flexibility will be open to new ideas and stretching their problem-solving approach to adapt. It can be hard to anticipate every outcome, and research shows the ability to adapt is a core piece of creative problem-solving. When faced with a roadblock, we can pause and remind ourselves that we have overcome all kinds of challenges before, and we absolutely can again. And how can we better stretch ourselves to adapt? We can do this strategically by being open to new ideas, seeing different perspectives, and coming up with multiple solutions. We can ask ourselves to be open to trying something new, even if it means changing our original plan completely. Viewing the situation in new ways by perspective taking will help us create different solutions. Seeking different vantage points might mean moving out and around instead of focusing and narrowing the problem further. Or it might mean taking a closer look at an earlier choice and even abandoning our current path for a different approach altogether. This can be hard, but remember that you can always get help from others. A fresh pair of eyes can provide us with another perspective and solution. So when we face an unexpected setback and need to pivot, collaboration becomes especially valuable and can set the stage for improving your cognitive flexibility. A team with a diverse set of backgrounds and experiences is better positioned to see the situation from many perspectives and can come up with a variety of solutions. But if your team misses out on those perspectives, it's harder to innovate new solutions. So the next time you hit an unexpected setback and wonder, where do I go from here? Remember that you can exercise your cognitive flexibility, you can stretch and adapt. This week, when you encounter an unforeseen challenge, pause and remind yourself that you can approach it strategically if you stay open and confident. And always be open to new possibilities to generate solutions. Have you ever received
All right.
feedback?
So Travis talked a little bit about the customer-driven playbook, which is really kind of core to the process that our team uses to iterate on the product creation. And so a lot of what you saw Satya talking about a little bit earlier is based on this methodology. We actually started by talking to customers, reaching out to them, and understanding the problems that they were facing, developing the concepts and the features that we thought would solve their challenges. And we did it in such a way by bringing together many diverse ideas so that we could actually, collectively come up with these concepts that could solve these challenges for the customers. But it's also really important to include the customers in this conversation as we do this product development and ideation. I think the other thing that's really important in this is to recognize that this is actually a framework to pivot the way that we think about obstacles. And so Travis talked a lot in the last talk about the idea of a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is something that, using the term hypothesis, gives you the safety to recognize that the idea that you've come up with may or may not pan out. but it gives you the opportunity to actually learn in that moment, that you could pivot from the learning opportunity, that if the hypothesis that you had doesn't pan out, you can pivot and you can actually continue to persist. I think another important dimension of this is that during the concept development and the feature development phase, that you actually want to develop multiple concepts and multiple potential solutions before you start to pick up the shovel and persist on one of the concepts or features that you've developed. Now, we talk about this in terms of hacking our culture. We've changed our culture dramatically over the past 5-10 years at Microsoft. But I think this is also a mental shift inside each one of us. We need to change the way that we talk to ourselves about that moment of failure. And we need to see it as an opportunity to forge ahead. We need to change. We need to give ourselves a framework that allows us to safely explore things that might not pan out. And so that's kind of how we think about the hypothesis progression framework. We need to change the action. Rather than just coming up with an idea that we're going to pursue, we actually want to come up with multiple ideas that we're going to pursue and test. And we want to change the values. We want to make sure that it's not the technology for technology's sake that we're pursuing, but that we're actually trying to build a solution for someone, and that we're testing that and validating that solution actually works for that person. Over a period, we had 10,000 direct customer interactions with our team. And the important reason why we prioritize those direct customer interactions between our team and the developers that we hope to serve with our tools, is that every one of these customer interactions is actually an opportunity to learn and to pivot and to get better as a team. And in fact, there's an industry term for this called developer velocity. Now, every company really wants to improve their time to value, meaning how long does it take for their product to reach the hands of their customers that they aim to serve and provide that value to them. This is often done with small increments. It can be really tiny things that actually yield large impact, as long as the signal from the target customers is really good. But it's also really important to kind of think about what is the cost of pursuing any idea. Oftentimes you might hear this referred to as the return on investment. If this pans out, how much do I have to invest to get the return that I would see? What we want to do is to identify what are those high impact, low cost things for us to invest in or to spend time and energy on. And I think the last thing to kind of recognize is that if companies and organizations and projects and even, student hackathon teams improve their iteration time, they improve the time that it takes for them to invest in an idea and to get signal from their target customer, whether that's something to pursue or not, that actually leads to a better bullseye in terms of the product market fit, as we call it. In other words, a better chance that the product that they're developing is actually going to serve the customers that they're aiming to serve. When we think about the actual market performance of these companies that have fast developer velocity, that have improved their developer velocity, they tend to have 4 to 5 times higher revenue, and they have 55% higher innovation. And so whether it's you starting to practice this with your Imagine Cup project this year, or it's you thinking about what it's going to look like as you become an entrepreneur or as you enter the industry and you lead a product team or you lead an engineering team, getting to the point where you have these small iterations and that you practice making it safe to fail, to get something wrong, to learn and to pivot and move forward, that is going to be an essential lifelong skill. So I just want to thank you for joining us today. I'm happy to take any questions and let me know. I'll look at the chat.
That was awesome, Amanda. I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Go for it.
So, sprinkled throughout this talk was this notion of empathy for yourself and empathy for the customers. Any thoughts on tying that together?
It's a great question. I mean, I think the thing that's so powerful about the growth mindset is recognizing that everyone is on a lifelong journey, a lifelong learning journey, right? Yourself included. You need to actually create the permission for yourself to take an interaction with another human, with the technology, whatever, and turn it into a moment of learning and feel comfortable with that. That's something that you need to practice yourself. And so that's kind of what I would say. When I think about the practice of being a developer, you face obstacles every 5 minutes, whether there's a compile error that you can't get to compile, there's a bug in your code, you have to learn new technology. So this practice of empathy and giving yourself permission and achieving the idea of self-efficacy, the idea that you will overcome this obstacle, this is actually something that you need to practice yourself internally as you work through all of your projects.
Well, Amanda, this has been amazing. I love the idea of giving myself permission to fail so that I can do some learning. So thank you so much for your time, my friend. Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Seth.
All right, so it looks like now it's my turn to talk about the secrets of product storytelling. And you'll notice that none of these things are secrets. You've basically learned them like, in 7th grade, when you were 13 or 14. These are not secrets. But I thought, because I can do whatever I want, because Morgan's not here and she left, I thought I would, if it's okay, I'm gonna borrow you, Ryan. Come here, Ryan. Let me show you. I'm gonna show everybody something real quick that maybe you have never seen before under the hood. Take a look at this. Take a look at this. Now, you've probably never seen these before, but if you're ever on any set that does production, you're gonna see them. Now, hold on. There's more. Look, like you just saw one. Look, there's one right there. And there's also one right there. So I'm going to tell you a story time here. There was one time, because you probably have no idea what this does. We had one of these many years. I had no idea what it did. One year, I was in Belgium with Golnaz, who leads Channel 9. And we were at this conference, and there was a guy who was going to give a talk. His name is Scott Guthrie. If you don't know who he is, he's basically like my boss, like 15 levels up. Right? He runs all of Azure, and he was going to give a talk about Azure in Belgium. And our job, Golnaz and myself, our job was we need to stream this out so everyone can watch it. That was our job. So like our boss, 15 levels up, we need to stream this. And so we show up and we plug all the HDMIs and whatever's together, and we could not get a signal for the life of us. So imagine your boss, 15 levels up, the stream is not working and it's getting close. We started to get really worried. And we had one of these things with us. We didn't know what it did. And one of the people there in Belgium, he came over and he's like, oh, just use this thing. It's called a decimator, which makes no sense. He said, just use this thing. It turns out that in Europe, they use a video signal called PAL, P-A-L, and in North America, they use something called NTSC, and those frame rates / frequencies, whatever, are just not compatible with equipment from either part. It turns out that this thing, if you put one signal in and get another signal out, completely changes any signal to any frame rate from any signal to any framework. He plugged this in, magic, minutes before we had to stream this out. This little gal, saved our collective butts. And so if you go to any place that does production, you're going to see one of those things. And you might never see one in your life, but that day, that thing literally saved our bacon. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this product, because you're not going to believe their website. Take a look at their website. This is their website. If you can get, this is their website. And the reason why they are so good is that this can be their website and they will still sell 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of these things to a ton of customers. This is their way. Go back in there. This is how they sell their, and we do this all the time. For example, you see here, the 4K scaling engines can scale and or frame rate convert between 351 input formats and 57 output formats, allowing for an amazing 20,007 possible format conversion. This is how we generally sell products. How we should tell stories is what I did at the beginning, right? And notice that it's very different. We are sometimes so committed to what we built as opposed to the stories that we tell, that sometimes we launch products that just, in a way that just doesn't work. Right? So let's talk about the elements of a story that you've all seen since you were a kid. A good story has a protagonist, the hero, an antagonist, inciting action, conflict, and resolution. And you're probably thinking, well, cool story, bro. What does this have to do with my product? I'm so glad you asked. Notice that the story that I just told you is a product story about something called the decimator that everyone buys. Everyone buys this. If you're ever at any serious production thing, they will have like 10 of these things just laying around. You saw 3 here. There's another one over there too. They have like, I don't know, 50 of them. It's like candy over here, and that's why I guess they're red. So in this particular story, the heroes of this story were me and Golnaz, mostly Golnaz, because she's awesome. The antagonist of this particular story was everyone who decided to have different video formats in Europe and North America. So those are the people. Always start with people. And you saw that from Travis, you saw that from Amanda, you saw that from Scott, you saw that from almost everybody. Donna presented this. We start from a people-centric area. These are the people. If you don't know who the people are for your product story, that should be like a flag should fly up. Oh, there's a problem. There's a problem. When you get into the story has to have these elements. We'll get into structure in a second. But a story has to have inciting action, conflict, and resolution. You saw that in the story that I had. We needed to stream our super bosses talk. I set the stage. We had conflict. The video format was incompatible. And the resolution was that the decimator decimated. It was a joke. Is that not funny? I thought it was funny. Decimated our problem by easily doing the conversion. And that was more compelling than saying we can convert between 20,007 combinations of things. This thing literally saved our bacon. We probably would have got in a lot of trouble. So the question is, how do I structure my story so that it's exciting? Well, one of the things that I did, and there's a really cool book called The Power of Moments, which Travis actually told me to read, that told us that moments are super important. And one of the ways to create a moment is to flip the script. So me laying on the floor, showing you stuff under tables is not what you were expecting, but it flipped the script. One of the other things you can do is you can disarm the audience automatically by recognizing who they are, where they are, and why they are. I do that. When I give a presentation, I always try to learn something in a language when I'm there. I always try to learn something about the culture. I always try to find a way to show that I have empathy for who the people are that this product is for. So let's talk about the structure, and we'll go through that. Exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. Let's talk about the exposition, the setup. The setup is super important. It should grab people right away. They should be able to see themselves in the setup. Now, if you're a video production person, you will see yourself in the setup of things not working, because in production, things never work the right way, almost ever. In fact, if you ever ask someone about a show, they'll always say, well, it looked good from the outside, and there was some series of dumpster fires that happened. So a production person will right away empathize that Seth understands, because he's been in my shoes. That's how we set things up. We automatically establish a kinship between who I am and who it is that I'm talking to. The second thing is something called rising action. And the rising action for me is this concept produced by Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School in a book called Competing Against Luck, called The Jobs to be Done. Jobs to be done. And it's defined as the progress that our hero desires to make in a particular circumstance. The progress that I put hero, but they put customer. The progress that our hero desires to make in a particular circumstance. For us, the progress we wanted to make was we wanted to stream our boss's boss talk so that everyone can learn about Azure, because that's our job. Now, if you have not done the work in trying to understand who the people are and what their job is to be done, your product is probably not going to work and your story won't. It doesn't matter how many features you have, it doesn't matter how cool the UI is, if you're not helping your hero make the progress in their journey, it's not going to be a problem. By the way, in our stories, and I don't know why I didn't say this, the hero is always our customer. Always, always, always. It's easy. So when you're looking at structured protagonist, always, 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 always the customer. Always the customer. So think about this. How do you figure out what the right job to be done is? You use the hypothesis progression framework that Travis was talking about. It turns out that we're all kind of talking about the same things, but from different perspectives. You have to actually sit down and watch a person do a job. Now, I'll give you an example. And I used to do this because I was a consultant many years ago. First, I was still in college. I was a software consultant. I would walk in and I would look for immediately what are repetitive tasks that people are doing that I can make a computer do without them. It's not that I'm trying to take away their job, it's that I'm trying to up-level their job to things that are more important and higher priority, like, for example, figuring out the people issues that might be in their organization. That's one example of me going in, looking, and finding a job to be done. You should also interview your customers. And when you interview them, you should ask them open-ended questions. Tell me about how you usually get foo done, and foo being just some random thing that they do. Well, we do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Have you found that blah, blah, blah? Open-ended questions. Again, the rising action of anything in your product story is what is the exact job to be done. You should do that way before you even start making a product. And you saw Travis speak about that a lot. You saw Amanda talk about that a little bit as well. So let's talk about the climax, the uh-oh moment. This is the uh-oh. We have the characters. We put them together in the setup. We know what the job to be done is because it's been clarified and people have heard it and they now feel it. Now by the time you're at this point, they feel a connection because they know that you empathize with them and their job to be done. And then you hit the uh-oh moment. The job to be done is actually super hard. There's no way I can get this done. Whatever shall I do? Right, and you kind of, hopefully you saw that a little bit when I was doing the story, on the floor. It was pretty clear that we hit an uh-oh moment in our job. We could not do it, and we were going to be in huge trouble. And notice that that's where you're like, oh, what's going to happen? And this is the key. Now, again, this isn't marketing or selling or whatever. This is you telling the customer story through the lens of the sword, which is your product. So as students, as you're watching this and you're doing if you're doing an Imagine Cup thing and you're trying to do a pitch, your product or the thing that you're doing after you've done all the work in understanding the customer, understanding their job to be done, you've interviewed them, you've figured out a way to solve that problem, you've verified these hypotheses with your actual customers. In theory, at the end of this, your product is the sword with which they vanquish the foe. It's the superpower that enables your heroes or your customers to overcome all of the odds. It is the thing that helps the protagonist actually be the hero. And if your product cannot help the customer be the hero, you should go back because maybe there was a hypothesis that just wasn't validated properly. You should go back, you should ask some questions and get people really solid on understanding that your product will help vanquish the foe. And the denouement is, and this is the part that people probably miss a lot, is this notion of, well, what's the moral of the story? I didn't do a very good job of it on my other story, But if I was selling or if I wanted people to look at the decimator, I'd be like, if you go to our website, now you'll be able to see. But basically, the main message of your story is meant to convey the theme, and specifically, what should people do with this information? It's the moral of the story. And you should always, you should never end a story with like, so go forth and do. Like, do what? It should be a smart request for something for the audience to do, because they're bought in, right? Now you've already talked to them about how you know their story, how you know their job, and how you've given them a sword. Now, how do they hold it? What are they supposed to swipe at? How are they going to do this? And that's where you need to be smart about the call to actions. These call to actions need to be a smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Let's go through each one of these briefly. You need to specifically ask people to do something after that with that information. What am I supposed to do with this? Well, now, if you ever have a problem converting your signals, or you can't get stuff to work, go to the website, download some information about the decimator, or you can buy it today using this link with a 40% discount code. Do you see that? Like, very specific. Specifically ask them to go to the website or to buy the product with a discount code. It's measurable. We know whether it's done or not. It's attainable. It's easy for people to do this. It's relevant to them because you've done the research on who you're talking to and what their job to be done is, and it's time-bound. If you act now, you get a 40% discount, right? I know this kind of verges, it feels like marketing, it feels like sales, but if you've done the empathy work correctly, it's not. You're actually helping somebody. And I honestly don't mind paying for things that help me do what I need to get done. If there is a specific job that I need to do and their product helps me do it, I will buy it happily and I will tell people about it, which is really cool. So let's finish up with a summarization. And then let me tell you a little bit about what I work on and how I tell stories on what we work on. So the first is, the stories always have a protagonist. Always your customer. Always, 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 always. Start with customer first. Start with empathy. Start with understanding. The antagonist is another person or set of people. Now, I need to be careful here because it's not that these are bad people. It's just that a situation has arisen in which there's a problem. For us, the antagonist was, for some reason, someone decided that video signals have to be different here than they are, and we're like, "Urgh." Or for example, and it doesn't mean that they're bad people. So don't ever think like these are villains. That's not how I think of it. Or for example, the antagonist might be your boss. Hey, you need to get this done in the next 2 weeks because we are seriously under. Doesn't mean your boss is a bad person. It means that you're under some bad constraints that are caused by a conflation of people. And I always try to like put people at the center of the story. The next is this notion of inciting action, which sets the story in motion. You got to set the stage. And when you set the stage, make sure that when you set the stage, it is something that the customer or the hero immediately identifies with. I'll give you an example. I gave a talk on cognitive search. And if you don't know what cognitive search is, it's a really cool way of building like your own custom search. It's like having Bing for your office. But the cool thing about this cognitive search is it's very intelligent about how it indexes stuff. And I started my story with, how many of you have a junk folder on your office share? And everyone was like, oh, I have that. How hard is it for you to find something? And what if you had to find something right now that was relevant, you know? And all of a sudden people are like, oh, I've been there. I've had that problem. How do we fix it? Right? And then we get to the conflict, which is like, you have to find this right now. And then finally the resolution. So the stories have all those. The structure, always do the setup, expositions, got to set it up. And again, it feels like I'm repeating these things, but with different, and there's a reason why. Always set up. The next one is this notion of rising actions, which is the job to be done. And then the climax is the uh-oh moment, can't do the job. Falling action, which is the product is the hero's sword that slays the monster, and denouement is the moral or the actual call to action. So look, I work in AI. That's my job. I'm a program manager in the AI platform group here at Microsoft. And our job is to help people have accessible AI. And this is how I tell the story. Right now, as you look around, everyone's like, oh, you should just use AI. Oh, and blockchain. We'll leave that for a different time. You should just use AI. And right away, everyone's like, well, but what does that mean? Is it too mathy? Is it something for me? Do I need to learn vector calculus? And it's a struggle. The first job to be done that I've identified with AI is, should people even, is this something even that will benefit our company? And so let me tell you how I go about doing that. With AI, and I know this is going to be a little reductive, but I'm okay with it. AI is a huge set of things. When people talk about AI today, they're usually talking about machine learning. And what machine learning does is it converts your company's nouns into verbs. What does that even mean? It basically converts data into functionality. That's it. So if you have data at your office that you think you can extract some functionality out of, that's what machine learning is perfect at. And you're probably wondering, well, hold on, what if I don't have enough data? Well, you can either build your own AI or you can use someone else's. For example, I used to work at a company called DevExpress, and I remember this guy came up to me in one of the booths, because I was a booth guy. And he was like, I could totally build this grid. And I'm like, I'm 100% sure you can totally build a data grid. Everyone's looked at grids, right, since Excel. And I was like, I'm 100% sure you could build a data grid. But is that your primary job? Because if you build it, you will have to support it for the rest of your life. I built software like 40 years ago, it feels like, and people still call me about it. And so he said no, and he's like, no, how much does it cost? I was like, oh, it's $2,000. And to him, $2,000, it might be a lot of money, but $2,000 is not a lot of money for the rest of your life, which was pretty cool. And so with AI, you can use models, and Microsoft has a bunch of pre-built models that you can totally just use and try out called cognitive services. If you want to build your own artisanal free-range model, we have tools for that as well. So if you think about AI, and particularly machine learning, machine learning is converting data into functionality. Microsoft can give you really good models that you can just build, AI models, or you can build your own. All right, so I am about done. Are there any questions? Should we get Morgan to come back here? Was there any questions on any of this? Hold on, I haven't looked at the chat. Hold on, here we go. Hold on. There's no question. I must have been really good at this talk. Do you have any questions about it?
I just don't think people know what to do. Like, you're laying on the floor, then
That's true.
You're talking about AI. Did you mention blockchain?
I did, because I'm trying to do a startup, and so if I say AI and blockchain, I'm going to get a ton of money. So listen, call to action for you. If you are building your stories for Imagine Cup, start with your hero and their job to be done. Everything else will sort it out. So you need to actually write it down.
That's your cue.
Yeah. All right, so what did you think? Was that weird? Did it look weird, me laying on the floor?
A little, but I think people appreciated the authenticness of it. I may or may not have been watching Twitter for a little while, and Twitter has some pretty quality screenshots out there already of Seth lying on the floor during his job.
Oh my gosh.
So enough said there, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, this has been super awesome. I've learned a ton.
I have too, and the speakers have all just been absolutely phenomenal. And to kind of wrap it up, I just wanted to, just like you said with storytelling, bring back up a few things and kind of leave students with some inspiration and where they can go next.
Let's do it.
So first of all, students that are out there, if you have not already registered for the Imagine Cup, you're gonna absolutely want to. It's super quick, it's free, it's easy. And once you register, you'll get access to both an Imagine Cup platform and also our Imagine Cup Discord server, which we are doing for the first time this year.
Ooh.
Yes, so we have tons of mentors in there that are Microsoft employees, our Microsoft Learn student ambassadors. And so we'll be supporting students all throughout the Imagine Imagine Cup. We can just have authentic conversations. People can ask about whatever they want. And there's also the opportunity for students to find teams in there and to actually build teams if they don't already have one.
That's really cool, because there may be people that are watching that are like, I want to be a part of Imagine Cup, but I don't have a team. Maybe you can make one.
Absolutely. And I was in there earlier looking, and there's a ton of people looking for teams.
Ooh.
So definitely check that out if you're like, that'd be cool, but I don't have a team or somebody to build with. And also think about that diversity in your team too. People from different backgrounds or different roles or whatever it may be, because that's going to make your team stronger. It's going to give you a different perspective with customers, with storytelling, all that kind of good stuff. So once you register for the Imagine Cup, actually starting in just about half an hour here, Seth. Well, sorry, Seth, you're not invited because it's for students only. But for students that are registered and have joined us in Discord, we're actually going to have some exclusive AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, in case you didn't know what AMA meant.
I'm not hip with the lingo, apparently.
Hip with the youth, yeah.
The youth.
Let's not say that again.
Let's
All right. So moving on from whatever that was, please join us over there. We're going to have some fantastic Ask Me Anything sessions. There is a channel specifically for the AMAs today, so you can find out who's talking and what they're talking about, and they will be answering your questions live. So that's going to be fantastic. 4 tech sections and 4 categories that are for the Imagine Cup. So if you're not sure what you want to submit towards yet, you can get some advice in there.
Absolutely.
And last but not least. So at this point, we're giving students our professional skills and advice, which I like to think that we did here today. Some people maybe not
not as profesh, but still.
Profesh.
I'm trying to. Is this not working, Pablo? No, he's like
It works.
Okay, he's saying it works, but he's a little older though too.
Hey, whatever Pablo says goes. So
Sure.
it totally 100% works. So you've gotten your professional skills today, and you're going to be able to gain more with the access to O'Reilly, which I'll talk about here in a second.
Okay.
And then we're going to have students do the AMAs in Discord, and so they'll be able to actually build that community there, which is essential, we know, as part of being a developer and a product team. And then tomorrow, it'll be the morning here in Pacific time, 8 a.m. Pacific time, wherever people are located. We're actually going to have 4 of those workshops for our Azure Bootcamp to learn about different technologies. We'll have mentors there. We'll have people actually hosting those sessions. And so that's a really awesome way to start gaining those technical skills. I think there's some AI stuff in there. So maybe we'll invite you to that one, to our special server.
Maybe.
Only if you're lucky.
Only if I'm lucky. There's going to be a special code. It's probably going to be like 47,000 characters long, and I'm going to be like,
chicken pecking?
They don't want me to join this. I typed it wrong.
Well, good news for you,
Yes, ma'am.
and for all of the university students out there. Our friends at O'Reilly actually have offered us a 40% off discount code on Travis's book. We made this ask to them specifically, and they're like, yeah, because this is amazing. I've had this for years. It's sitting on my bookshelf, and so this is the one Travis was talking about, and he wrote, highly, highly, highly recommend it. I know even some of our student ambassadors, when I was chatting with them, they said that this was fundamental in some of their hackathon projects. So you're going to want to check that out. Anybody that's watching the live stream right now can do that, and then later we'll also be posting it on the Microsoft Imagine Cup account on Twitter. And then for students, once again, not for you.
Not for me, students.
For students that are in the Discord, so register for the Imagine Cup, they will have the 30-day free trial, full access to the entire O'Reilly library. So the good stuff like this, the other books Travis was showing, and much, much more. Professional skilling stuff, technical skilling stuff. There's a lot of goodness in there. And with the 30 days, it's the perfect amount of time to get started with the Imagine Cup.
Hey, yo, I think so.
And with that being said, I'm going to throw it back over to Pablo to tell you about what's next coming up on the Imagine Cup. Thanks for joining Seth and I. Pablo, over to you.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Morgan. We are students of life, Seth. We may be old, but we are students of life.
Amen.
In fact, I learned so much today from every single talk. I really want to thank all of our speakers today, Scott Hanselman, Amanda Silver, Donna Sarkar, Travis Loudermilk, and Seth, of course. And it's just been an incredible experience. And we did this all for you. We're doing this for you as students. We want you to get excited, to feel empowered, to bring your idea to life in the Imagine Cup. In fact, we've been doing it for 20 years. We've been coming together as a company. We've seen you come together as teams to bring these ideas to life and bring them to a global stage and really make an impact in your communities. I hope you learned a lot today about what you can do to build your team, to bring your story to life, to innovate, to fail and fail often and fail fast, and that there are no bad ideas, right? So think about that as you're coming together with your team to talk about your Imagine Cup project. One of the things that students that have participated in the Imagine Cup before always tell me is that the advice they would give other students is to just give it a shot, to try it out, because you never know how far you'll get if you just give it a shot. And that's one of the reasons why we created the Epic Challenge. The Epic Challenge is a really easy way for you to participate in the Imagine Cup without having to build a proof of concept or a minimum viable product. All you have to do is come up with your idea, work with your team on a pitch, and come up with a document that states all the things that you learned about today, about who's your target market, what is the problem statement that you're trying to solve, and how you'll bring it to life. And you get some early feedback on that. And we hope that this entire event that we have planned for you today has helped bring you to that. Also, there is digital swag. We forgot to mention earlier. If you go to aka.ms/epic swag, I'm assuming that you'll see it down here or up there or somewhere at some point, aka.ms/epic swag. You can get your digital swag today for the Imagine Cup. So thank you all for joining us. And remember, the journey may start here, but you can take your idea as far as you want to go. We have many students that brought their ideas to the Imagine Cup that have now created companies to bring their idea to market. We have so many ideas that have come to us using artificial intelligence, using machine learning. Our winners from last year, Roweba, used an IoT device to help mothers in Kenya be able to check the health of their babies from their small villages. They don't have access to doctors or healthcare. There's just so many ways you can have an impact in the world with technology. And we hope that you come up with those ideas and bring them to the Imagine Cup. So please register today at imaginecup.com. As Morgan and Seth were talking about, we have our AMA starting here shortly. So join us there and continue to find inspiration all around you. And we hope that you feel empowered by Microsoft to bring technology to solve those problems. So thank you for joining us, and welcome to the 20th anniversary of the Imagine Cup. Thanks, everybody.